Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new story. What if Naruto and Fem Kurama were stuck on an island? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Where in the world was he? Naruto could feel the warm, grainy sand beneath him and hear the waves coming in softly a few feet to his right and birds chirping in the distance. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the sun was just about to go down. As it started to go down, it turned the blue sky his favorite color, which is orange. He had all these clues, but he didn't realize he was on a beach until he picked up some sand in his hand. A beach. He trailed off quietly before turning his head to look out at the water. What the hell am I doing? How in the world did he get here? Where did this place come from? He stood still for a few minutes, trying to remember what had happened. But he couldn't remember anything. The last thing he could remember was walking through a thick forest with his team. So, unless he just appeared on a beach out of nowhere, something must have happened. He only had to decide what. Maybe he was just fooled, or maybe he was just having a very real dream. He really hoped it was the second one. He slowly got up and stood up straight, groaning softly because his body was so stiff. He rubbed some of the coarse sand off the back of his head and neck, then looked around to try to figure out where he was. He was on what he would call a typical island where people end up when they get lost or something. Even though he hadn't read many books in his life, he knew that at least. He saw tall perennial plants with long, hard stems that reminded him of shrubs. Below them, he saw a group of real shrubs that looked like a low fence that kept people from entering what he thought was a jungle, or a wood, or anything. There were a lot of mountains in the back, way in the middle of the island. They were so tall that, from where he was sitting, he was sure that clouds would cover the tops of those mountains if there were clouds in the sky. Overall, the island he ended up on was both beautiful and scary. There is a lot of beautiful green, huge structures, and dangerous mystery. Okay, island. I'm on some freaking island in the middle of nowhere, he said quietly at first. With each word he said, his voice got louder, and the corners of his mouth turned down as he spoke. Well, isn't this great? Either I'll get eaten by something or I'll be here alone for the rest of my life. Monkey, shut up. Naruto blinked once and said, "Huh," as he turned his head to see where the other voice was coming from. When he saw the person sleeping next to him, he was surprised. The first thing he saw was something orange. She had smooth, orange hair that reached her chin. It looked like the sky just before the sun started to go down. It looked like it was rich and smooth. Even though she was beautiful, he wasn't thinking about her hair. His attention was really on the two long ears that came out of the sides of her head like a fox's. In his short life, he had seen a lot of strange things, like people with horns and tails. But he had never seen anyone with animal ears. Who was this girl, anyway? He leaned closer to her as she pursed her lips so he could see her face better. She was very pretty, like, incredibly cute. Her face was in the shape of a heart, with soft cheeks that went down a thin jawline to a thin chin. She had a cute, small nose that was slightly curved up near the tip. This made her look almost bratty or snooty. Her lips were below that. They were soft, round, and just a little bit wet, so they had a tiny bit of a shine in the light. When he first saw her, he thought she was cute, but now that he has had a good look at her, he would call her a beauty, not a cutie. He looked down farther, but stopped when he saw that she was completely naked. What he did see, he would say that she had curves. Curvy and short. Short, tanned, and curvy. All of that was so much that he got red in the face. Nope, naked girl. We all remember the last time I ended up peeping, he whispered to himself, shivering a little as he thought about the time he fell into a woman's bath at an onsen and ended up peeping. He turned away and went to take off his jacket. After brushing the sand off the back, he put it over her. Even though his jacket covered her from the top of her chest to her hips, he could still see her slim shoulders, thick thighs, and beautiful calves. We hoped that she wouldn't get cold. He gave a small sigh and turned his head to watch the sun go down. Well, I guess I'll at least have someone to talk to here, he said softly, trying not to wake up the girl next to him. Well, when that person wakes up. When he looked back at the girl, he saw that she was sleeping with her head on his blanket. Even though he didn't know why, that made him smile. He was pretty sure by now that he wasn't being tricked, so he would have to stay on this island until someone came to save him. It would have been awful to do that by yourself, but it could have been done with someone else.
Even though he didn't know how he got to this island in the first place, he decided it no longer mattered.
Now, his only goal was to stay alive. He wanted to go out and see the world while he still could. But he knew that leaving this girl alone on the beach would be a very bad idea. So, even though he wanted things like firewood, he chose to stay. After waiting for a while, though. Eesh, this is so boring, Naruto said as he sat there with his eyes a bit narrowed. He hated being by himself with his thoughts. They were rarely as positive as the person he seemed to be on the outside. Even so, that didn't mean he wasn't an optimistic person. He just couldn't stop bad thoughts from coming into his head whenever he was alone. Right now, he was having bad thoughts about all the good things he would miss now that he was on an island, like tasty ramen, sleeping in a bed, and taking a hot shower. Also, there were the people he would miss. People like Kakashi, Sakura, Choji, and Shikamaru, Tsuchai, Tu, and I am. Also Tsunade and Jiraiya. He would miss a lot of people, that was true. Even though he had only been awake for an hour or two, he missed them so much that he started writing their names in the sand. About the 5th or 6th time he wrote Kakashi, the girl next to him started to move. When he turned his head to look at her again, he noticed how her ears seemed to move and twitch as she woke up. This, along with the way her face was a little scrunched up, made her look very cute. He was able to see her face well when she was sleeping, but he didn't get a chance to see what color her eyes were. She was finally starting to wake up, so he would get to see them. When she finally opened them, he could see that they were a pretty red. He parted his lips to greet her as she looked up at the sky. Okay, then, get up and she. Oi, can it, monkey, she said rudely and groggily as she woke up and swatted her hand in his direction. Then she yawned loudly. I would have liked to hear something other than your voice first thing in the morning. He quickly opened his eyes wide and then slowly moved back. I would know that superior tone anywhere. You'd better. I didn't spend all those damn years stuck inside your weak body just to be forgotten in an instant, she said, tossing his jacket to the side as she stood up and showing herself to him without shame. Yuck, it's disgusting that you put your dirty, itchy jacket on top of me while I was sleeping. For a moment, he couldn't think of anything coherent to say, so he just blurted out the first thing that came to mind. But it took him a while. As he stood there awkwardly, she looked back at him. But her eyes were so cold that he thought they were the reason he was freezing. Are you just going to keep looking at me or what? I just can't believe. She wrinkled her brow and asked, can't believe what? You're a girl. At his comment, she frowned and her cheeks turned just a little bit red against her will. Or did this boy get the idea to say such a thing to her? She is the most powerful nine-tailed fox. She stood up and took a step toward him as she let out a low growl. She snarled as she looked at him with such anger and hatred in her eyes that, if she had been stronger, her look would have set him on fire and turned him into ash. Did it really take your primitive brain that long to figure it out, or were you so shocked that you had to say it out loud? Are you monkeys that stupid? But, no, I just didn't think you were a girl, he said, his voice getting louder as he spoke. And why is that? She asked him in a threatening tone, cutting him off as she stomped toward him with her fists clenched. It won't matter much to you or me if you're a girl or not after I rip your head off. Naruto jerked back. I just didn't think it would happen. I didn't think the nine-tailed fox could go from being well, the nine-tailed fox to being well. Complete your thought, monkey. Well, he stopped talking as he tried to get a little more brave. I just didn't expect to see you as a naked girl, especially a naked girl so. Well, she kicked some sand at him with enough force that when the grains hit his chest, they hurt a lot. GRR, I told you to finish your damn sentence. You're lucky I haven't already gutted you for wasting my time. Fine. Beautiful. There, I said it. I didn't expect you to be so beautiful, he said, closing his eyes and turning his head away as he waited for his horrible death. But that horrible death did not happen. No heads were ripped off and he wasn't cut open. At least, not fast enough to keep him from opening his eyes and looking back at her. Her legs were now turned in so far that the insides of her knees touched, and she seemed much less haughty and superior than before. Her cheeks were a little red, and the tips of her ears were bent down. He couldn't believe that the demon he had known all his life as a giant fox that destroyed villages could strike such a cute pose. There was a lot to think about, but those things could wait. Huh?
You think I'm pretty? She asked, pausing before she said the last word and looking into his eyes with a doubtful look on her face.
He quickly shook his head yes. Definitely. Well, of course I'm beautiful. I am the elegant nine-tailed fox, after all, she said softly, quickly regaining her composure as she kept looking at him with her red eyes, trying to see if there was any hint of lying in what he said. Maybe I'll let you live since you used what you thought were your last words to praise me. At least for now. If I killed you, I'd have nothing to do on this island, so think of yourself as lucky, monkey. After she was done talking, she gave him a big smile. If he didn't know who she was at the time, he would have been flattered that such a beautiful girl would say that to him instead of suspicious. Well, it's better than getting my head cut off. Most mortals would agree with you, she said with a smirk, sticking her tongue out and turning to face the ocean. I can't believe I made it all the way out here by myself. Maybe I put too much effort into my escape. Naruto pursed his lips and then slowly pulled them apart.
How did you get away?
She turned her head to look at him, and the slight twist in her body made her tone back arch just enough to show off a certain curve. He wasn't sure if the nine-tailed fox cared about being modest, but he was sure that the demon fox, who was now a girl, would be very upset if he stared at her. Still, no matter how hard he tried to keep his eyes on her, he couldn't help but look down for a split second, which, to his surprise, made her laugh out loud. She gave him a smirk and said, "Wouldn't you like to know? There are a lot of things I want to know right now," he began hesitantly, being careful with his words so as not to anger the demon he had just calmed down by calling her beautiful. She raised one eyebrow, and, "Monkey, do you think I'm going to answer your questions? I wouldn't say I expect you to, but I would like you to," he said with a shrug, then slowly walked over to where his jacket had been thrown. "Shouldn't you be more worried about your own survival than about asking me stupid questions? Why don't you just do monkey things like burn some wood for warmth or something? I guess you could say I have a burning curiosity," he said with some hesitation as he put on his jacket. The look he got wasn't so much one of amusement as it was one of boredom. Naruto asked. "Well, what can I do in exchange for some questions?" Before she turned to face him, she crossed her arms in front of her chest. As she walked toward him, she softly hummed. When they were about a foot apart, she stopped. From this far away, he could tell that she was shorter than him, maybe about an inch. He had completely forgotten about that. Maybe it was because he was too scared to think when she had earlier said she would tear him apart. "Anyways, I want head pats and belly rubs, too." He blinked. "What? Do I have to say it again and again to get through your thick head, monkey?" she asked with a pout. "No, I heard what you said, but I'm just a little." "Well, I was surprised. I thought you were going to ask me to swear an oath to you or give you my life or something," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head and smiled at her. "And why would you be surprised? Your life is already mine. Do you think that because I'm so great I can't enjoy simple things like head pats and belly rubs?" Naruto gave a head shake. "No, I'm not thinking so much as I'm just surprised." "Really? Foot massages. I've decided to add foot massages to my list of demands. Massages in general." "So," he asked, "how many questions? You know, for all that, a 30-minute session of one of those services gets you one answer to a question you have for me," she said, letting her arms fall back to her sides. This made him tilt his head just a little bit up so he wouldn't get an inappropriate look at her big chest. "But I can ask you to ask a different question if I don't want to answer the one you ask me." He thought about what she said for a moment before shaking his head. "Well, it looks like that's the best deal I can get." "It is." He spoke up after a moment of silence. "So, do you want all of that right now? If I were a human monkey like you, I'd be more worried about finding shelter," she said, looking up at the moon, which had risen while they were talking, and then back up again. "You might be able to handle it now, but it's only going to get colder and colder until you're shivering against a tree like a poor mouse." He let out a soft sigh and then turned to look at the line of trees behind him. "That's a little too late now. Maybe you could have made something by now if you hadn't spent so much time staring at me in your sleep." "I didn't stare at you," he yelled, turning his head back to her and putting his hands up in defense. "I woke up about an hour or so before you did, and I put my jacket over you," she grumbled in a low voice. "That stinky, dirty, and itchy jacket of yours," Naruto quickly replied. "I can't imagine you smelling any better." He jerked a little as he realized what he had just said. "You did snuggle up against it." She raised an eyebrow and gave him a curious look. "Oh?" He decided to stay quiet. "So you think I smell bad, she asked, moving closer to him and tilting her head to the side so she could look into his eyes. "Did you just say that?" Naruto took a quiet swallow and then slowly nodded his head. "Yes, I could kill you where you stand, but that would be a waste," she said after a second pause. She looked up at him with a furrowed brow. "Think of this as a favor, you dirty monkey. And here I was thinking you'd make me smell you or something." She laughed at him and let out a snort. "I hope." "Yeah, no." Naruto's answer was cut off by a gust of cold wind that made him shiver. "Well, it's getting colder, so I guess you were right." "I'm always right," she said with confidence, snorting again, this time with a lot more laughter than the first time. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "Right. I guess I'll do like a little mouse and find a tree to hide behind. If you are naked, why aren't you cold?" She gave him one more smirk, put her hands on her hips, and proudly puffed out her chest. "In this form, I may look like one of your monkey women, but I am far better than them in every way." The cold doesn't bother me at all. Lucky you. Yes, I'm lucky, but you're not, she told him. Instead of standing here, why don't you go get some wood to make a fire? She asked, leaning slightly toward him as she spoke. He gave a shoulder shrug. Would you be willing to help me? What? And let myself be forced to chop down trees like a monkey worker? Naruto made a pouty face. He could try to compliment her again. Maybe it would work the same way it did the last time he told her she was beautiful. She really did have a lot of pride, after all. Man, if this worked, it would save him a lot of trouble in the long run. After taking a deep breath, he decided to try. But you could do it much better than I could. Well, of course I'd do it better. I am the magnificent nine-tailed fox, after all, she said, putting her hand on her chest and tilting her head up in a proud way. It's no big deal for me to cut down trees. I just walk around in my fox form and do it. He asked, why are you in this form anyway? She told him with a straight face and narrowed eyes, none of your business. He said to himself, nice try, before he said something back to her. So, are you going to show how great you are, or are you just going to stand there? Oh, you don't believe me, do you? You don't think the scary nine-tailed fox can bring down a tree? HMPH. Just watch me, monkey. Let me show you some of my power so you know to respect me, she said as she stomped over to the nearest tree. The tree she chose was about 10 times taller than she was, and the stump was so thick that she could probably fit inside it if it were hollowed out. She turned her head back to look at him after stretching out her shoulders a bit. She asked him, are you watching? He called out to her again. I am. She yelled back, you'd better be, and then kicked the stump of the tree hard. Hiya. Her leg went through the stump so quickly that it looked like it went from one side to the other by magic. He might have been making it up, but it seemed to him that a gap had just opened up between the stump and the rest of the tree. Before the tree fell over, the nine-tailed fox picked it up and carried it back to him. He thought for a moment that she was going to use it to hit him in the head, but she didn't. Instead, he watched as she used her small, delicate hands to crush it into pieces about the size of campfire logs. Everything seemed so strange that he didn't know what to think. Wow, aren't you just amazed, monkey? She asked, the corners of her mouth turning up into a smile. Even in this weak form, I have more than enough power to break a tree apart. That was pretty cool, he said as he walked up and picked up one of the pieces of wood, nodding his head. I'm so glad you chose a tree instead of me to do that too. Going around and gathering enough wood to make a good fire. He set everything up for them. When he went on missions with his team, he wasn't the one who made the fire, but he had seen it done enough times to be able to do it himself. His team didn't make him do it, which was good because he had already forgotten almost all of the boring survival skills he had learned in the academy. But before he started the fire, he noticed that his fellow stranded person hadn't spoken in a while. This made him look up at her. HMPH. She made a face. Naruto's eyebrows raised. What? She narrowed her eyes and put her hands on her hips as she walked toward him. I think I deserve something for saving you the trouble of having to collect wood on your own. Do you want me to pat your head? He asked uncertainly. She gave him a smirk and leaned her head forward a little. Oh, good. And here I was afraid I'd have to explain it to you. To think that he would be stuck on an island with a beautiful naked girl who turned out to be the nine-tailed fox was crazy. Who just happened to want him to pet her head and rub her belly. He thought for a split second that he was in a bad movie or something. But that thought went away quickly as he awkwardly put his hand on her head. She said, and smiled a little as he began to pat her head. One of the few things your monkey hands can do is pat your head. I would hope they are at least good for something, he said, moving his hand ever so slightly toward one of her ears so he could start scratching at the base of it. Her response came right away. She jerked back as soon as she rubbed her thumb against the base of her ear, as if the stimulation was too much for her. Even though she could have cried out or squealed, she just bit her bottom lip. Oh, the ear technique. He blinked. Here, technique. Yes, so, you like it better this way? He asked as he put his hands on her ears and massaged them. Her legs really gave out. Ah, yes, that's it. I'm so glad I didn't kill you. I'm glad you didn't also kill me. Oh, shut up, you fool. This was really weird. From being a cool, killer queen, she became. No matter what this was. Okay. How long do you want me to keep doing this? An hour perhaps. Wait, an hour. I thought we had agreed on half an hour. That was for the questions, monkey. This is to help you with the tree. Ugh. Alright. Of course, I'm the nine-tailed fox, so of course. He shook his head. Right. How much time had passed? Not really that long. He had been on the island for only 3 days at this point. But those 3 days had been hard. He had used them to build a simple shelter out of sticks and leaves, look for food and water, and take care of his island friend. See, the first 3 things on the list weren't actually that hard to do. On the other hand, entertaining the 9-tailed fox was like walking through a burning field with your eyes closed. No matter what he did, it seemed like he would get burned. Sometimes to the letter. He seemed to still have his crazy ability to heal very quickly, which was a relief. In all honesty, keeping up with her was making him more tired than staying alive. Yes, she was sometimes cold, often rude, and sometimes made threats against him. But there was something else that bothered him, something to be ashamed of. He really wanted something to not be a problem. The body was hers, in particular, the fact that it was naked. In a sense, naked. Not only that, but he was almost certain that she did it on purpose whenever she showed off a certain part of her body, like her breasts or her rear. What the heck was he supposed to do besides force himself to look away? He was lucky that, other than the first time she said he was ogling her while she slept, she had never insulted him for looking at her. He didn't know if that meant she was okay with him looking or if she hadn't noticed. All he knew was that it was a problem that she wasn't wearing clothes. He needed to do something. He had never imagined that one day, his goal would be to get a girl to put on clothes instead of taking them off. Life was sometimes strange. How, though, would he do it? He let out a soft sigh and decided that he probably wouldn't have an idea anytime soon. So instead of worrying about it, he decided to have fun and take a bath in one of the deeper parts of the river he found near the beach. During the day, the water was warm, and he could see all the beautiful flowers and trees around him. This made bathing on the island a very pleasant experience. But that wasn't all. Another thing that made it so nice was that he was by himself. The 9-tailed fox never went with him because it liked to take a bath at different times. Aside from when he was sleeping or taking a bath, he spent most of his time with her. It wasn't a bad thing to be with her, but it wasn't a great thing either. Even though she killed a lot of people in his village and he held her inside of him for a while, they were supposed to hate each other, but he wished they could just get along. Even if she didn't insult him or call him a monkey for 10 minutes, he would be happy. Why did she call him a monkey in the first place? Despite all the questions he had asked her and all the ways she had avoided answering them over the past 3 days, he had not asked her that. Was it a question that should be asked? He didn't even know her name or how she got out of the seal yet. This whole deal where he helped her out and she dodged or ignored his questions was very unfair. He had had enough of her. When he floated back onto the water, he let most of his body go under. He pursed his lips and closed his eyes as he looked up at the sky and tried to calm down. No matter what he did, he always seemed to be thinking about her. He thought that they would be on this island for a while, so wouldn't it be best if he tried to make friends with her? She may have done terrible, horrible things, but based on what he had seen of her so far, he could say that she was not completely bad. She was sometimes mean, rude, and cold, but she was only nice to him a few times. There might have been hope. He might be able to say yes if he used every bit of optimism he had. Still, he wasn't the type to give up on something before giving it a try. So, he got out of the river and walked over to a nearby flat stone where he had laid out his clothes. He told himself that he would do his best to make friends with her. His clothes were washed in the river. He dried himself off with his jacket instead of a towel before putting on his shirt and pants. He tied the jacket around his waist and took a few steps toward the beach, but he stopped when he thought of something. Something about how she wasn't wearing clothes and how she kept avoiding answering questions. It's possible. At least it was worth a shot. The worst thing that could happen was that she ripped off his head, but he was sure that wouldn't happen. As he walked back to the beach on the path he had made for himself, he stopped just before coming into view. He took a moment to look over at where the 9-tailed fox was while hiding behind some big bushes. She stood next to the water with her back to him. Her short, orange hair moved with the gentle ocean breezes, and so did her ears to a lesser extent. As he watched her, he thought that she looked very stylish. Even though he couldn't see her face, he was pretty sure she had a calm look on her face. She stood there for a few seconds, then sat down and started drawing in the sand. When he wasn't around, it was always interesting to see how she behaved. Even though she was arrogant and out of this world, she had a more human side. He had been watching for too long, so he came out from behind the bushes and cleared his throat loudly enough for her to hear. She quickly erased what she had written in the sand and turned to face him. "Monkey, it was about time you came back. I was going crazy waiting for you." He asked, "Did you wait for me?" "Of course, you're my source of fun on this island, so I'll say yes." He thought it was time to go through with his plan. He replied with a flat, then took a few steps toward her and said, "So, I have a question." "You're going to have to serve me first," she said simply, pointing with her finger to get him to come closer. "Even if I scratch your head or rub your belly, it's not like you're going to answer the questions I'm asking anyway," Naruto said, crossing his arms. She raised an eyebrow and gave a mean grin. "Oh, did you get some while you were in the bath?" Maybe I did, he said with a wrinkled brow. I'm just sick of you taking advantage of me. If you're going to kill me, you might as well K. The next thing he knew, he was slammed against a tree. The blow surprised him more than anything else and knocked the wind out of him. When the pain finally went away, he opened his eyes and saw that the arm she was using to pin him against the tree was the one she had when she was sealed inside of him. It was so big that she had her long, clawed fingers curled around both him and the tree and was covered in thick fur. You've forgotten your place, monkey, she said harshly as she walked towards him and gave him a cold look. If I wanted to kill you, I would kill you. Since you're still alive, it's clear I don't want to kill you. You can't really keep me alive just so you can pet my head and rub my belly, right? I can keep you alive for any reason I want. She rolled her eyes. And what's the point? It has nothing to do with you. That's how you answer every question. How can you be the legendary nine-tailed fox if you're too scared to answer some stupid questions from a brat? He yelled at her. He watched as her face went from calm to confused. She pursed her lips and looked down at the sand as she thought. It was clear to him that what he had said had made her think. He hoped this would work out for him and that she would change her mind. I hoped she wouldn't kill him by throwing him against a tree. I am the nine-tailed fox of legend. I have no fears. Nothing at all, she said softly after a few moments. Ask your questions, monkey. She finally let him go and changed her arm back to its human form. Okay, he said, rubbing his sore collarbone with his hand and adding, I have a lot of questions. I don't have all day. He made a face. Right, so let's begin with something easy. What are you called? TCH. Starting off by asking the tough questions, she snarled. Why is that such a difficult question? He asked with a raised brow and a slight tilt of the head to the side. Why do you think your monkey texts only talk about me as the nine-tailed fox? My name is sacred, and I only give it to people who deserve it or who I consider to be on the same level as me, she said, putting a closed fist on her chest over her heart. I will answer any other question. I will not give you my name at all. Naruto waited a moment before he let out a sigh and said, fine. Then I'll ask you something else. Why do you say that people are monkeys? She looked confused and blinked. Because all of you are monkeys. That's all there is to it. But, how? People and monkeys are very different from each other. Consider this. Do monkeys eat bananas? He said. He nodded his head. Yeah, because people also eat bananas. Monkeys and people are the same. But, he said, a lot of animals eat bananas. She groaned and said, okay. Then, here's another. How about their hands? They do, Naruto said. And the corners of his lips turned up just a little as he started to find this whole thing funny. People also have hands, so monkeys and people are the same, she said, nodding her head in agreement. You both have 5 fingers on each hand, too. There's no getting around it. Don't fight over it. Alright, I guess I'm a monkey then, he said in a sarcastic tone. She snapped her fingers and gave him a thumbs up. There you go, she said. Now you understand. So, if I'm a monkey, doesn't that make you a monkey too, since you're in that form? He asked. She gave him an angry look right away. No, you little brat, not at all. I'm a lot better than you. Remember, you're right. He rolled his eyes as he said, vastly better. She sighed and said, you really don't respect your elders or your people in charge. Everyone says that about me. Why are you even in that shape? Because I want to, she said in a quiet voice. He hummed to himself when she gave a boring answer. It was so different from the others that he was sure it was a lie, but he decided not to say anything about it for now. Maybe he would talk to her about it later. Okay, then. Anyways, I have more questions. A more important question, he said with a shrug and a hand slowly raised to his stomach. How did you get away from the seal? You look at me like you expect me to give you a long, complicated, and deep answer, she said with a smirk as she walked towards him. But the way I broke the seal was that I made myself leave. Yes, anticlimactic. I know. However, I thought that the sealed. She replied with a shrug. So, you made yourself leave. You think I spent all those years inside of you just counting the hairs on my tails. From the first day, I tried to figure out how to get away. It just so happened that I finally figured out the code while you and she said, monkey squad. So, is that why you wouldn't tell me? Naruto puckered his lips. Because I'd get disappointed. TCH. As if. She crossed her arms and said, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to. But now you do. She said, yes, I've decided to answer your questions. Before he spoke again, there was a moment of silence. Why do you want to keep me alive? Since I want to. I really don't know why you're looking into it so much. I am an immortal, infinitely better being. And I don't want to kill you because it would be boring. I've told you many times that you are the only thing that makes me happy on this island. Why don't you just leave this island? he asked. After he asked her that, she bit her bottom lip and let out a huff. After gritting her teeth for a second, she turned away from him and whispered something under her breath. Seeing her like this made him raise an eyebrow and lean in to hear what she was saying. When she saw him lean in, she let out a low growl and swatted her hand at him to stop him from getting closer. Oi, she was annoyed and said, I was getting ready to answer your stupid question. I can't leave this damned island because I'm stuck here. Oh, why does it happen? Well, could it be because you don't have any tails right now? I see you have fox ears but no tail. Do you agree? He asked, and the way he said it made her take a step back. She was angry. TCH, monkey brains and the fact that they can make such stupidly right guesses. Naruto made a soft hum. I was right, then. Yes, you're correct. Congratulations. Do you want something, like a banana? Do you want me to get down on my knees and worship you because you guessed right? Is that what you want, monkey? She asked as she stomped the rest of the distance between them. What do you want? He asked her after a moment of silence. She was surprised that he answered her question with another question, especially since the question he asked her was so big. What did she want? She wanted a lot of things, but none of them seemed like a good answer to his question. She took a step back and looked at the sand while she thought. When the silence got too uncomfortable, she had to force herself to answer. I'm not sure. Naruto hummed, then pointed to his shelter behind her and said, why don't I ask you more questions there? I want to find a place to sit down. I have a few fruits that I found this morning. You're welcome to some. Like I need your permission to eat your fruit. She rolled her eyes. But when he started walking, she followed him anyway. It would still be nice if you asked, he told her with a smile as he let her in first. His shelter was simple, but he was proud of it. He used a bunch of strong sticks and some of the biggest leaves he could find in the jungle to make what was basically a hut. It was big enough for him to stand inside, but only if he stood around the middle. To think that it took him 6 freaking hours. As she walked in, she said, yeah, which was a dismissive answer. When she sat down on the leaf mat he had made, the first thing she did was reach over to the spiraling sphere-carved wooden bowl where he kept the fruit. She picked up a whole bushel of ripe longans and started peeling and eating them right away. As she did this, she looked at him with a smirk on her face. He knew she was making fun of him, but he didn't tell her that. She wiped some sweet fruit juice off her fingers and then asked, so, what other questions do you have for me? So, when you broke out of the seal, did you use all your power or something? He asked her as he sat down next to her. I did. The process took a long time and used up a little bit of her chakra at a time. If I had used it all up at once, I would have alerted the seal, and it would have used whatever countermeasures its creator had put in it to trap me even more tightly, she said with a quiet sigh as she started peeling some of the longans so she could eat more of the sweet fruit later. Is that why I'm still carrying the seal? She nodded her head and said, I'd guess so. How much chakra did you use, then? Will your tails grow back? He asked. A lot. Certainly. They will get bigger again. One tail after another. Maybe then I'll be able to get off this stinky island, she said, nodding her head twice as she answered both of his questions. He said, I hope you take me with you. She laughed and said, that will depend on whether or not I find you interesting enough to be worth my time. Naruto smiled and said, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it. You haven't threatened to kill me in over an hour. I'm improving. Maybe you are, she said. When she was done peeling about 8 of the longans, she put them all in her mouth and spat out the stones into another bowl. What's the fruit like? She gave a shrug and said, sweet and soft. But there's too much work. I like apples much better. So, are apples your favorite fruit? He asked. Yes, she said with a nod of the head. He softly hummed, what's your favorite color? Blue. Food. Honey. Season. Spring. What is with these simple questions? I'm just trying to get to know you, he answered, reaching over to pick up a longan for himself. I might as well, right? We'll be on this island together for a while. Not many mortals do that. Get to know me, I mean, she said with a sigh as she briefly closed her eyes. Half the time, they don't even get to know each other. Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, would you like me to learn more about you? He sighed to himself about how strange his question was. I wouldn't mind. She trailed off as she picked up all the longan peels and put them in the bowl with the stones. Oh, so that's that. It will be fun to learn more about the 9-tailed fox, he told her, and his excitement made her blush. Ask a while, she stopped talking and took a few seconds to think before continuing. I lied to you earlier. That wasn't right for a person like me. The real reason I'm in this shape is that. It is my starting point. The shape I take when my chakra is low. I dislike it. Naruto moved closer to her and asked, why? Because it's so small and fragile. It's been a long time since I've seen myself like this. I don't remember how weak I can be. And without my fur, I feel naked. Cursed hairless monkey form. she said, and then her face turned sad as she finished. Swallowing quietly, he decided to be brave and put his hand on her shoulder. It was warmer than he had expected, and her lightly tanned skin was as soft and smooth there as it was on every other part of her body he had touched so far. In fact, if he hadn't been trying to comfort her, he would have stopped to admire it and every other part of her. She didn't pull away, which surprised him. He was so shocked by the fact that she let him touch her without her permission that he almost forgot to say anything. Luckily, he remembered before things got awkward. Look, you're neither weak nor small, and you are not at all weak. Even though you look like this, you are still the famous nine-tailed fox. TCH. Being comforted by a monkey brat, she said, though her face betrayed the harshness of her words with a small smile. To think I've already fallen this low. Naruto smiled back and put his hand on her shoulder before taking it away and saying, well, I'm glad it worked. If it hadn't worked out, I would have cut off your arm. He shuddered. Thank God that worked. You should thank me instead, she said with a soft laugh. Right, thank you, nine-tailed fox, he said. Then he reached over and scratched her right at the base of one ear, which made her purr softly and happily. Yes, more thanks. Ha, Naruto said, slowly pulling his hand away because her reactions were getting too intense for him. I'll scratch your ears more later. She let out a sad coo when he stopped scratching her, and her ears kept twitching until she put her hands on them. She said with a soft pout, you'd better. I will. Don't worry, he said, giving her a friendly smile. Alright. So, do you have any more questions for me? Naruto nodded. I do actually. Since you feel like you have nothing on, why don't you put on clothes? Clothes? She raised her eyebrow. Do you like what you're wearing? Sure, I guess. Clothes. She trailed off slowly, then pursed her lips and looked down at the ground. If I wore them, I'm sure I'd be more fashionable than you. He laughed and said, prove it. She said, fine, and then she closed her eyes. He thought she was going to go into the jungle to make clothes out of the leaves and vines, so he was surprised when her body started to glow red with her demonic chakra. After a few moments, soft shapes started to form over her, and when the glow went away, she was wearing clothes. They were nice clothes, too, not like the dirty clothes he was wearing. Damn, did she look sexier now that she was wearing clothes, or was it just him? The way her shorts were just tight enough to show off her meaty thighs and wide hips. He couldn't see her back from where he was sitting, but he was sure it would have been great to look at as well. The top she chose was also great. It showed off her slim shoulders and made her already prominent bust stand out even more. The blue went well with her orange hair and white shorts. Help, he was going to start drooling or something if he looked at her for one more second. So, he started awkwardly, forcing himself to look into her eyes. You can make clothes. I can make a lot of things, she said with a shrug. It's just a matter of moving the chakras. How about that? He asked. Perfect chakra control, she simply said, then looked down at herself and back up at him. How do I look? Still beautiful. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. Definitely. Good, she said with a smile that made her cheeks flush. You do have better style than me, he said, tugging at the bottom of his shirt. Better than most, actually. Of course, she said with a haughty air, puffed out chest. But what made you choose that? He tilted his head to the side and asked. She shrugged. Well, that monkey girl with pink hair that you seem to like always wore tops with no sleeves. I just think that's what's in style. The briefs. I saw a pair like them right before I went inside you. Monkey with pink hair. You mean Sakura, she said. I didn't care enough to remember her name. And pink-haired monkey is a good name for her anyway. I wouldn't say that. Naruto shook his head. She is kind and caring. She is a nice person. How would you describe yourself? He made a soft hum. I feel like I can't say that I'm a good person. I don't know if I'm a good person or not. Only someone else can tell me that, he said, shrugging his shoulders. She cocked her head and said, what a answer that is surprisingly wise. I was wrong about you, monkey. Everyone does that, he said with a smile. She smiled back. Even though she didn't want to, she couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. It was contagious, so dangerously contagious. Damn this brat for being so hard to get mad at. If she wasn't careful, she might end up getting attached to him. Yes, well, that's why you always manage to stay alive when you meet ninjas who are better than you, she said. Are they really better than me, though, if they didn't take me seriously? She said, maybe not, but if they had thought you were a threat, they would have kicked your behind. However, you wouldn't have let them do that. You would have helped me a little bit, Naruto said. She made a pouty face and said, I might have. Probably at the last minute. I really would have liked to see you get beat up. Rude. Not right now. He cocked his head. Though, she said with a smirk, if anyone is going to beat you up now, it will be me. I'll take that as a compliment, she said. She laughed and then gave him a smile. Good. Then she hit him in the arm with a good punch. He winced right away and said, "Ouch. Why did you do that?" "Because you touched me without asking." In the end, it still worked out. Yeah. She then turned away and blushed, which made him lean toward her to see what was going on. "Thanks anyway." Naruto, had he been shocked. When she called him by name, he and she were both surprised. But for a second after she said it, she didn't realize it. When she did, her face turned red and she left right away. He didn't follow her. One look at her confused face told him that she needed some time alone to think. Maybe he did, too. Now that the sun had set and the moon had taken its place in the sky, Naruto had already made a fire and eaten his dinner. She was sitting close to the water with her legs bent so that her knees were pressing against her chest. The waves would roll in gently, sometimes getting far enough that her feet would get wet. She didn't seem to mind, though, because she didn't move an inch. Naruto tried not to stare, but he couldn't help but give her the occasional worried look. He knew she saw him because her ears would twitch ever so slightly whenever he did.
She didn't say anything, though, so he didn't know if that meant she didn't mind or just didn't have the energy to tell him off.
After she told him so much, he found that he liked being with her more than being alone, and that he wanted to hear her voice more than this oppressive silence. It was a sudden change for him, but he was okay with it. He thought they were on their way to becoming friends, even though things looked a little rough right now. When he turned around and looked at her again, he decided he needed something to break the ice between them. Since he now knew that her favorite fruit was apples, he thought he might go into the jungle and pick some for her. He had seen apples in the morning when he was picking the longans, but he didn't pick them because the idea of eating exotic jungle fruit instead of apples was much more exciting to him. Even though it was dark, he was sure he could help her. "Okay," he said quietly to himself, then turned toward her and called out, "I'm going to go spend some time in the jungle." She did not say anything back to him, but she did nod. That was enough for him to know that she had at least acknowledged his words. Tying his jacket around his waist, he gave her one last look before walking into the thick jungle brush. About 15 minutes into his journey, he noticed something. It seemed to him, as he hacked at some of the obstructing foliage with his kunai, that no matter how many times he had cut paths into the jungle, he always had to do it again. It was like he was in some sacred grove that would regrow every single night as if enchanted with magic or something. He was as scared of it as he was inspired by it. Eventually all the trees melded into one, but he remained confident that he would be able to get to where he had seen the apple trees. Being from a part of the world full of dense forests helped to ease his mind as he traversed this one. Still, all that time spent exploring forests didn't prepare him at all for the next step he took that made the ground click. "Huh?" He let out, then stopped right away. He quickly jumped back as he tried to figure out what had made that click. He did so just in time to avoid the explosion as the earth where he had stepped erupted in a flurry of dirt, rock, wood, and bits of metal. The explosion was small, but it was strong enough to throw him into a tree and cover his face and arms with soot and other powders. After a moment, Naruto groaned, "Ugh, what the hell was that?" When the pain finally hit, he raised a hand to his bruised chest and groaned again. That was where he had been hurt the most by the explosion. He was glad to find that none of the shrapnel had gotten inside of him and that nothing was broken. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Phew, they could have gone a lot worse." If he had been any slower on that jump, his legs would have been blown right off. He would have ended up a double amputee. No amount of his superior healing factor was going to fix that. Getting up, he brushed off the front of his shirt and walked over to the crater to inspect what remained of the trap. There was not much left, just some bits of metal. Just what was that? He had not noticed any chakra signatures that would have alerted him of explosive seals, so that meant that the bomb he had stepped on was purely mechanical. Was this island just filled with random explosive traps or something? If it was, just how many more would he have to worry about? To think that he would have to deal with this on a trip just to find some apple trees. He was definitely going to have to investigate all of this later. He decided that walking on the ground was too dangerous, so he jumped from tree to tree, just like he did in the forests around Konoha. He finally found the group of apple trees he was looking for and said, "Finally," gingerly sliding himself down from the branch he was on. He made sure not to walk over another explosive trap as he made his way to the apple tree closest to him. The apples were wonderfully large and marvelously crisp in his hands as he picked them. They were this reddish-pink color that was so vibrant that they glowed in the darkness like round, little red lanterns. Just looking at them was delicious, he thought just before biting into one of them. The skin was somewhat thicker than he had expected, but he thought that it worked amazingly with the actual fruit. The fruit itself was superbly sweet, slightly sour, and terrifically crunchy. If he loved them, when he did not even like apples that much, then she was going to love them too for sure. Picking about half a dozen of them, he carried them by turning his jacket into a sack. Satisfied with the number of apples he had gotten, he then rushed back to the beach. He got back to the beach much faster than he did to find the apple trees because all he had to do was find the path he had made and follow it back. When he finally got back to the beach, he saw that the nine-tailed fox was still sitting by the water. Unlike before, her legs were stretched out toward the water, and she was leaning back with her hands on the sand behind her for support. It looked like she had given up on something. She said quietly, with her eyes on the water, "I heard an explosion when he walked toward her. If you hadn't come back, I would have looked for you." He walked up to her carrying the apples on his shoulder and asked, "Eventually." "Eventually," she said softly, turning her head to look at him. "I would have been worried." "That's a relief," he said, offering her a smile as he made his way next to her and sat down. "I was worried that you didn't care about me." She shut her eyes and made a brow crease. "Don't joke about that." Naruto widened his eyes slight in surprise. "Oh, I thought about things while you were gone," she said slowly as she pulled her legs back and looked at him. "What did you have on your mind?" "About us," she said, pausing for a moment. "I've been through a lot in my long life, but I've never been stuck on an island with a cute monkey kid until I met you. I had no idea I'd end up in a situation like this until I met you." When she said he was cute, he let out a quiet gasp. "Is that something bad?" She gave a head shake. "Yes, but now I don't think so. At first, I wanted to leave, but after we talked, I changed my mind." He asked in a soft voice, "What changed?" "You know, I used to not understand how you were able to make friends so easily. Sometimes, you even made friends with your enemies." She started, changing the subject slightly and pausing to take a breath before continuing. "But now I do." "You mean what?" "You are so bad for me. Like eating too many apples. You are sweet right now but will hurt me in the long run," she said, avoiding the question with a soft sigh. "Speaking of apples, I can smell them on you. Please hand me one." Naruto didn't understand what she was saying at first, but he eventually reached into his jacket and got an apple for her. "Here, thank you." She seemed very deep in thought. He didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. He also didn't understand what she was trying to say, but he did notice that she had asked for an apple instead of just taking one, and that she had thanked him for it. When he saw her take a bite out of the apple, he did the same thing with the one he was already eating. She ate quietly, but he could tell she liked the apple because every time she took a bite, the corners of her lips turned up to make a smile. If he only paid attention to her, he could hear her purring as she got close to finishing her apple. She ate much more quickly than he did. By the time he was halfway done, the only part of her apple that was still there was its core. Before she threw the core into the water, she waited for him to finish. She licked her fingers and said, "That was tasty. This island has some good apples." He gave a little nod. Yeah. They took a moment to enjoy the scene in front of them. The moon was casting its silvery reflection on the water as the gentle waves ebbed and flowed onto the beach. Both day and night, the view was beautiful. It would be easy to get lost in it. But he found himself looking at her more than at the ocean. Even when it was dark, her orange hair was just bright enough to stand out. The dark blue top she wore seemed to blend in with the darkness around her, and the white shorts she wore seemed to blend in with the white sand. This made her face stand out more than anything else. She told him, "You know, if you keep looking at me like that, you might make me blush." And she turned her head to look at him while giving him a smirk. He smiled and didn't feel the least bit bad about being caught staring. "I wouldn't mind. When you blush, you look cute." She laughed out loud, as if, "I think you're really cute when you blush," he said, his words causing her cheeks to flush, which then prompted him to point at her face. "Like that. You look really adorable." From beautiful to cute to adorable. "Is that an improvement or a change for the worse?" she asked, her blush getting worse as he heaped praise on her. "Why can't you be all three?" he asked with his head turned to the side. So, all three. I guess I'm now the pretty, cute, and adorable nine-tailed fox," she said, and as she said each word, the corners of her lips moved up until she finally smiled. Naruto smiled back at her. When she patted him on the head, he liked it when she blushed or scrunched up her face, but he liked her smile the most. After a short pause, he asked, "So, I have a question. What was all that about?" She raised an eyebrow. She pursed her lips. Just by looking at her, Naruto could tell that what she had been thinking about earlier was very important to her. So he didn't say a word while he waited for her to get the courage to answer his question. "I don't have any friends, Naruto," she finally said, pausing before saying his name again. When I was born, I was old enough to know that making friends with a mortal when I was immortal would only hurt me. So, I never gave them a try. I tried to get along with my fellow tail beasts, but we just couldn't. I grew to dislike them, so I stayed away from them. I can't get away from you now, though. When I heard that explosion, I felt scared, which made me even more sure of this. Against my better judgment, I seem to care for you now. His eyes widened once again at the implications of her words. Before he knew it, he was grinning like crazy, his enthusiasm springing out into his aura, causing her to smile as well despite just pouring out her feelings to him. Gosh, he really was just impossible to be sad or mad around, she thought as she looked at him. Maybe that was why she had grown to like him so much in just a few days. Do you want to ask me what I think you want to ask me? She laughed. You're making me say it, huh? Please put this on the record. He gave me a sly grin. She put her hand up to punch him in the shoulder, but instead she smiled at him. Naruto, I want to be your friend. I'd like to be your friend, too, he said with a smile and a happy sigh. I hope you don't expect me to give you my name yet, she replied, causing him to pout. We've been here for less than a week. I'd hate to give you my name now and then regret it later if you happen to anger me or disappoint me. All right, I won't force you. Good, she said with a smile. She licked her lips after that. Do you have more of those apples with you? He said. He gave a soft laugh and reached into his jacket to get another apple for her. Of course, he said. I was sure you would want more. I don't think one apple would be enough for you. She said, thank you, and took the apple. You're right. When I'm in my fox form, a whole orchard is all I need to eat. The less space it has, the less food it can hold. Well, where does that food go? Are you going to the bathroom or something? Naruto asked. I don't know, she said as she bit into the apple and shrugged her shoulders. It all goes away in the end. That must be helpful, he said as he watched her eat. She nodded her head and said, I guess so. You're right. He turned his head back to look at the moon and said, it's getting late. I wonder what time it is back home. I have no idea. I have no idea what time it is anymore because I spent so much time inside seals, she said with a quiet sigh. I miss the early days, when you monkeys were still small and easy to control, when I could go wherever I wanted and have fun. He looked at her again. Oh, nowadays, I have to live in fear because I'm afraid that some ambitious fool will seal me inside of something. She let out a low, predatory growl. I don't want anything to do with your stupid wars. I only want to be left alone. Every time I've met someone like you, Naruto, it was because they wouldn't leave me alone. Naruto pursed her lips and put a tentative hand on her shoulder. She tensed up at first, but then she started to relax, which made him give her shoulder a soft squeeze. She put her half-eaten apple down on her lap and turned to look at him. There was a vulnerability in her red eyes that made him want to protect her. Not like a sibling or a frenemy. I won't let them put you in a box again. As if they would listen to a dumb brat like you, she said with a quiet snort. Yeah, but, she stopped him and said, I appreciate the thought, Naruto. She gave him a warm smile as she slowly put her hand on top of his on her shoulder. She kept talking and said, I really do. Every time we talk, I can tell that you are not lying to me. When you know this, everything you say, more precious to me. I'm glad, he told her, smiling back at her. You know, I never thought I'd become friends with you. Same, she said with a smile. But I'm glad I was wrong. It could just be this island. If we can find a way out of this, maybe it will go away. But I'm going to remember the times I spent with you for a long time, Naruto. He started to lean toward her without realizing it. I'll do the same, until the day I die. You'd better, she said with a smirk. I didn't just say all that much for you to forget me. I'd never forget you. She sighed happily and said, it's getting late. I can tell you are tired, even though you are trying to hide it. I'm sure you were tired after wandering around the forest all night looking for apples. On top of that, there was the bomb, he said. Yes, it's the bomb. She picked up her half-eaten apple, grunted quietly, and slowly stood up. We can worry about the bomb later. You need to sleep right now. He stood up to protest and said, I can stay up a little longer. It's not like I have to get up for anything. You monkeys need to sleep, don't you now? You're still. I think it's growing. Don't baby monkeys need to sleep for at least 8 hours every night? They do. But on this island I can sleep for 8 hours whenever I want to. Well, I want to watch the sun rise with you, Naruto, she said softly, biting her bottom lip afterward. Naruto's eyes got big. Oh, okay then. So I guess I can go to sleep now. Hey, do you ever sleep? Not often. Since I woke up a few days ago, I haven't been able to sleep. Since I'm made of chakra, I don't need to sleep, she said, shrugging her shoulders. But I do like taking a nap every now and then. Would you like to go to sleep tonight? Why? He asked. The shelter has more than enough room. She took a big bite of her apple and shook her head. I wouldn't mind, she said. Throw away the core when you're done eating, he told her. She nodded, and he walked toward his jungle hut, saying, I'd hate for bugs to get in. This house is my last stronghold on this island. She laughed quietly at what he said, then threw the core of her apple into the water and skipped over to him. I'm sure bugs are the last thing on your mind when I'm here. He turned his head just in time to see her smile. I'd rather be with you than with bugs any day of the week. She told him to be quiet and waved her hand at him as she walked toward the shelter. Honest, he yelled. I know, Naruto. You don't have to say that to me. She smiled at him as she walked into the shelter and said, I can tell when you're lying to me. This thing always looks bigger from the outside. Yeah, well, maybe we can work on making it better in the future, Naruto said with a snort. At the moment, this is the best I can do. She gave him another smirk and said, I know. Ish, it's the first time I've ever let a girl spend the night at my house, even if my home is a tent made of leaves and sticks right now. She sat down on the leaf mat and said, this must be a big deal for you. This is the first time I've ever spent the night with a monkey. So I guess we're both new to this. She looked at him and said, anyways, this will do. Not the most comfortable surface I've ever slept on, but better than sand. He took the apples out of his jacket and said, maybe tomorrow I can go out and find more leaves to make the floor a little bit thicker. I'll come with you, she said, laying her head on the floor with a quiet grunt. How are you? Naruto asked as he folded his jacket into a pillow. Hard? You could have this, he said, holding up his jacket. It's not a pillow, but I don't have anything else. Lie down, Naruto. I have a better idea, she said. This made him raise an eyebrow. Oh, he wasn't sure what she had in mind, but he went along with it anyway. He laid down on the floor with his jacket under his head and asked, so, what now? Even though they could see each other's faces because of the moonlight, all they could see of each other in the darkness of their hut was that she had orange hair, and he had blonde hair. When he was lying down, he couldn't see anything, so he had no idea what she was doing. He heard some shuffling and a few quiet breaths as she moved closer to him. Then, he felt something warm press against his stomach. Much better. She put her head on his stomach, and the heat from her cheek made him blush. So, you came up with this? He asked after a moment. She said. It's like killing two birds with one stone, isn't it? You get to say you slept with a girl, and I get a pillow. That isn't really what that means, but alright. Then what does it mean, Naruto? She asked, blinking. He quickly replied, I don't think you want to know. Well, I do now. Are you sure? Yes. He made a pouty face. It's just a euphemism, Naruto said, taking a moment to think of a way to say it so she wouldn't slap him. When boys say they want to sleep with a girl, they mean they want to have sex with her. He closed his eyes and waited for the inevitable smack or slap. It didn't come though. Instead, his answer was met with silence. Blinking, he tilted his head forward to look down at her. With how dark it was, all he could see was the faint orange of her hair and the silhouette of her head. What he couldn't see was the mad blush on her cheeks as she tried her best not to squeak or squeal. She was embarrassed by a lot of what he said. Naruto was the only person who had ever made her blush, and she could count them on one hand. There was something else she felt besides embarrassment. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt like a soft, soothing heat was building up inside of her right below where her navel was. What was it? She didn't ask him because she didn't think he would know. Instead, she took a deep breath and parted her lips to tell him what she thought. Oh, yeah, all right. Naruto, I think I'm going to sleep now. Good night. He put his head back on his jacket. Yeah, he said. Good night. Sleep well. With that said, nothing else was for the night as they both soon fell asleep. Was something strange going on between them? Maybe a little. Since they became friends, he felt like she was becoming more and more needy. It seemed like this big change happened that night, just a few weeks ago, when she dragged him out of the shelter at the crack of dawn to watch the sun rise with her. Maybe it was because he almost got his legs blown off when he walked into that explosive trap. But she didn't seem to let him go anywhere alone anymore. She was with him from dawn until dusk, whether he was in the jungle looking for more food or on the beach. He did not mind. In the end, it just meant that he could talk to her a lot more. At first, the only time she didn't go with him was when he took a shower. She would now also stay with him during those times. She used to turn her back on him when he was taking a bath, but now she feels comfortable enough with him to talk to him face to face when he is bathing. It had been weird for him for a while. After spending so many weeks with her, he got used to having her around. So much so that when he was in the river naked around her, it didn't bother him as much as it used to. Since the water helped hide his bits, he didn't have to worry about exposing himself when he talked to her, such as the talk he was having with her at the moment. He said, Shukaku didn't seem like that at all when I fought him. And she laughed softly. Oh, yes. Before he went completely crazy, he loved flowers a lot. Too bad he spent most of his time in the desert, she said with a smirk on her face. Even though he was partially sealed, I'm still surprised you were able to beat him. It shows how weak he was. He told her what he thought as he washed his hair. Yeah, well, he was crazy hard to deal with. I had no idea that all tailed beasts were like that. I always thought that most of them just wanted to kill everyone. They're only like that because you monkeys wanted to kill them first. Well, seal them first, she said, mindlessly twisting strands of her short, orange hair with her fingers. Most people are nice when they are alone with someone they can stand, but not with each other. We all hate each other for some reason. I don't know why. She shrugged her shoulders and turned her head away from him so she could look at him out of the corner of her eye. It's been a long time since we've all been together. I don't remember why we broke up. I just know we did. We hate each other for no reason. He asked, how long ago did this all happen again? Like, she started, but then stopped and started counting on her fingers instead. Maybe 10,000 years ago, or something like that, he said. He made his eyes bigger. Oh my, that's. How old are you? I can't keep track. How do you forget how old you are? He asked as he swam closer to the rock she was sitting on near the basin. You kind of just stopped caring after a few thousand years, she said, shrugging her shoulders and looking down at him again. She licked her lips and looked up at his handsome face before looking down at him again. You monkeys care a lot because you have things to celebrate every year. Was it just her, or did he seem to have changed in some way? She sometimes couldn't take her eyes off of him. She felt this nice warmth in her heart and sometimes in other parts of her body when she looked at him. She should have been worried, but the feeling was so nice that she gave in almost as soon as she felt it. She only noticed it when they slept together in his shelter for the first time that night. It was that nurturing and primal heat that would start to flow in and out of her whole body if she didn't stop it. Even though she should have been more worried, it didn't hurt to give herself a little treat, right? Well, if you have a birthday, I can celebrate it with you, he said with a smile, as if he didn't notice how she was looking at him. She gave a sad smile. I did, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. We can always just pick a date. The day doesn't matter as much as the meaning, Naruto replied, leaning back in the water and submerging himself up to his shoulders with a happy sigh. She asked him softly, would you do that for me? As she tilted her head to the side and looked into his eyes. He gave her a look and a nod. Yes, I'd. Maybe once we figure out what day it is, we can pick a day for my birthday, she said, the sadness in her smile disappearing and being replaced by a toothy grin. Watching that sudden change in his expression filled him with confidence. When you smile, you look really pretty, do you know that? Her cheeks flushed, her ears bent downwards, and her eyes widened in surprise at his sudden compliment. How did that get there? I just had to say it, he said with a smile. You and your impulses, she said softly, squeezing her lips together as she felt her cheeks getting hot from her own blush. Now you've made me blush again. Is that what you like to do, Naruto? Make legendary tailed beasts blush. He let out a chuckle. Only if you do it. When he spoke, his words made her blush even more. You're really putting it on now. He pointed a casual finger at her and said, only because I know you like the praise. That's true, she said, putting both hands up to her face to cover her cheeks. But, him, she gave her head a slight shake. I like the compliments, but it's embarrassing to blush. Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, why? Well, it's not right for a beast with tails to be so easily swayed emotionally by a human, she said, rubbing her cheeks to see if she could make them less red. But does it matter here? We're alone on an island, he said. She pursed her lips and thought for a moment about what he had said. His words were true. He was not going to judge her, nor would he ever cause her such strong emotions with ill intent. In fact, the fact that it took her so long to figure that out made her feel even worse about herself. Since she had her hands over her cheeks, he wouldn't be able to see her blush turn an even deeper shade of red. Not until she was ready anyways. You're right, it doesn't matter. It's just you and me on this island, she said softly, nodding her head, and then lowering her hands to show him that her cheeks were still red. There, he gave her a smile. If it makes you feel better, there are times when you make me blush too. Not as much as I do, she said with a pout. Maybe you could do more. She wrinkled her brow and perked up her ears. Oh, that's a problem. Just putting it out there, he said with a nervous smile when he saw her smirk. I think you just gave me a challenge, Naruto. I rarely back down from a challenge, you know. As she spoke, her tone changed from the dull one she usually used to a much sexier one, which made him shiver. It won't be hard to make you blush. Even after she said what she did, his tan cheeks stayed the same color as if by magic. Alright, then. I see you have already put up your defenses, she said with a deep, feminine laugh as she slid off the smooth rock she was sitting on and moved closer to the water. It doesn't matter, I have all day and if I have to, all night. He quietly took a bite. Because she was standing over him and he was sitting down, he couldn't see her face when he tried to look up at her. Instead, he saw the underside of her large, full, and very well-shaped breasts. They were quite a sight to see. They were held back by a tight, dark blue top that seemed to be almost skin-tight where it mattered most. Then she bent over and put her hands on her hips, which made her breasts bounce against each other right in front of his face. As the blood rushed from his head to his growing erection, Naruto started to salivate. He lowered himself a little bit more into the water and pursed his lips to hide the fact that he was really hurting down there. Even the cold river water couldn't bring him down when a beautiful woman walked up to him. Hey, he said in a shaky voice, making her hum in a curious way. She said in a soft, fake whiny voice, Come on, Naruto, blush for me. I want to get back at you. I even made a pose and everything. He moved away from her slowly. It's not like I can make myself blush whenever I want to. Oh, so this will make you blush? She asked innocently before putting her hands on both of her breasts and squeezing them together. Don't you male monkeys like it when women play obscenely with their own breasts? As he watched her touch herself, Naruto bit his bottom lip. She was also doing it quite roughly, digging her fingers into the soft, doughy flesh of her breasts as she kneaded and squeezed them together. For a split second, he thought he saw the faint outline of her pert nipples as they hardened under her thin, midriff-exposing top. He finally decided that enough was enough and stopped. With a shaky breath out of his nose, he forced himself to turn his cheek to her and look away. Then he got red in the face. Gotcha, she said, pointing both fingers at him and puffing out her chest with pride. Why yeah, you got me, he said, sinking himself into the deepest part of the river until everything below his nose was underwater. She let out a happy sigh and then sat back down on her rock. I like that. He looked at her quietly and said, I don't think I'll ever be able to look at you the same way again. Oh, everything you did, Naruto said, his cheeks again reddening as he looked from her face to her breasts, and back to her face. It was too hot. What? I was just teasing you. It's not like you can't have. You? She asked, her eyes widening slightly as she realized what she had said. As he nodded his head, his blush slowly crept up to his ears. Yeah. She kept looking at him with her lips pursed. She wouldn't tell him, but a part of her was proud of the fact that she could get him excited by just touching herself. Even though this form was weak and not nearly as grand as her fox form, she thought it had its advantages. Perks like being small enough that she wouldn't hurt Naruto if she laid her head on his stomach, or being able to feel that strange, but oddly pleasant, feeling of him being taller than her. Now that she thought about it, she liked being this way after all. It was nice that she could stand next to him almost as if he were her equal. He gave her confidence that she had never had before in this class, even more so now that she knew how much she had changed him. Do you need some time alone? She asked, not knowing what to say. She swallowed quietly and slowly looked down from his face to where his groin would be under the water. In all honesty, she was starting to wonder what he was keeping from her. She had wondered about things before, but now that the subject had changed so much, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Just thinking about it gave her this warm, hazy feeling that filled her head with a naughty fog. She was so confused by all of these feelings, some of which were forming in her heart and others in places like the spot under her belly button and her special place between her legs. What was going on with her? He slowly shook his head. I think, if you give me a few minutes, it'll go down. After that, we can go back to the beach. She mumbled, as sure, and put her hands in her lap. I'm sorry, Naruto. I might have gone too far. No, it's not your fault, he said with a hand gesture. It was just a joke, and I'm a guy, so stuff like that happens. Does it? Does it hurt? Do you really want to know? She took a quiet moment to swallow and then answered his question. I'm curious. Kind of, he said in a soft voice. Do you need help? She asked softly, her face turning red. The eyes of Naruto got bigger. I think I can handle myself, he said after taking a moment to slowly exhale to calm himself down. You don't have to help. You can go back to the beach first if you want. She made a sad face and shook her head. No, I don't want to leave you. Oh, okay, Naruto said, biting down again on his bottom lip. Before he spoke again, there was a moment of silence. You know, I never would have thought you could do that. I didn't think I'd be able to do that either. It just happened. As she said this, her 2 ears slowly started to hang down. He slowly made his way back to her. Still, that was really impressive. If we make it back, maybe you could try being an actor to blend in. I'm trying to blend in. She looked at him and pursed her lips when she saw the toothy grin on his face. If we ever get back, I'll probably just go back to roaming the wilds, but I'll make sure to come see you. I need to know how my favorite monkey in the world is doing. That would be great, he said, his happiness at being called her favorite clear in the way he spoke. You might find that people pay more attention to you in that form than when you're a fox. How so? Well, when you're in that form, you're beautiful, cute, and adorable, and you also have a really sexy side I didn't know about, he said. She gave a small gasp and turned red at his words. You would be very interesting to a lot of guys and even some girls. Oh, yeah. He raised one eyebrow. What's the matter? Naruto, the only monkey I want to pay attention to me is you, she said, her blush getting stronger. I feel sick to my stomach just thinking about someone else looking at me the way you do. That makes me very happy to hear, he told her with a soft smile. It'd be better. You should be proud that I think so highly of you compared to the other monkeys. His smile got bigger. Yes, I am. Just being able to spend time with you is an honor. She gave him a smile back and then looked down at the water. She pursed her lips and thought for a moment about what they had said so far. It had become normal for them to pause like this when they talked. They were normal and didn't make them feel weird at all. The fact that they could be quiet and not feel awkward showed how well they knew each other. She was thinking about things when she heard him start to walk toward where she was sitting. He reached out to her and asked, "Hey, could you throw me my jacket? I think I've had enough showers." "Not at all," she said. Then she picked up the orange jacket, which she used to hate but now found kind of cute, and gave it to him. "Thanks." As he got out of the water, he wrapped himself in a towel and took a few steps back behind her to dry off. After he finished quickly, he went to where she was sitting and picked up his clothes. Just as he was about to tie his wet jacket around his waist, she pulled on the back of his shirt, making him turn his head to look at her. She kept her head down to avoid meeting his eyes. "What's up, Naruto?" "Yes?" he asked with a slight tilt of his head. "I don't want to go back," she said. He raised one eyebrow. "Oh, I don't want to go back. Here, I feel safe. Here, I get to be with you, someone I can trust." She gave him a look. "Do you want to turn around?" When Naruto looked into her eyes, he pursed his lips. Those red eyes that could show so many different feelings. They could be fiery when angry or dull when sad. He could see right away that they were weak in some way. He took a moment to think about it after being asked. When was the last time he thought about his friends back home or his own home? He thought that the most important reason for her to stay on this island was that it was safe. But why did he choose to stay? She was happy. She didn't see a tailed beast in front of her, just a girl who was in an unfair situation. He would admit that he was young and impulsive, but he also knew that if he was making the wrong choice here, he wouldn't have felt as sure when he finally parted his lips to tell her his answer. Even if he had wanted to leave, he would have stayed after just one look at her. This island was now his home, where he spent every day and night with her. "No, I don't want to leave you." After he said that, she gave him a hug right away. He gave her another hug. Even though they didn't talk to each other again, something had changed. He did. She did. There was no going back. Things between the two of them were getting better and better. At the crack of dawn every day, the two of them would climb to the top of one of the jungle's tallest trees to watch the sun rise. They would sit right next to each other on one of the thicker branches, with her head on his shoulder, and watch the orange and red colors as the sun rose from behind the water on the horizon. After that, they could turn around and talk while enjoying the view of the endless greenery behind them. The island went on as far as the eye could see, and then some. It was full of tall trees with beautiful flowers growing out of them, and there was a huge mountain range in the middle. Seeing these two amazing views right after each other was a great way to start the day. Even though the island was very big, he hadn't explored much of it. Even though there was a lot to find or learn, he was happy to just spend time with her at the beach, the place with the apple and longan trees, and the part of the river where they would bathe. All of that was only a tiny part of the huge island they were on. But it was pretty much his whole world to him. Of course, she too. She was her friend and, in the end, the only other person on the island with him. But the word friend started to feel wrong for someone like her. He didn't think it was right to call someone so close to him just a friend. This was especially true after he told her he would stay with her even if they found a way off the island. There was definitely something unique about them, something that could change your life. He just didn't trust himself enough to say what it was. Not yet, at least. Even if things didn't get worse, he would have been happy to just be with her. So many parts of their relationship were things he had never really done with anyone else. There were times when they teased each other and times when they talked about more serious things. There were also times like this when they were quiet. As they looked out toward the jungle, they could feel the warmth of the sun on their backs. The sun had just risen and taken its place in the sky. But today was a little different. Even though she had her head on his shoulder, she was also brave enough to wrap herself around his arm. When he put his head on top of hers, he rewarded her for being brave. Neither of them had said anything either. It didn't bother them, though. Even when they didn't have anything to say to each other, they could still smile and enjoy being together. Every day that went by, they got more and more used to each other. Even though the touches they shared said a lot about how close they were getting, they never talked about it and always found a way to change the subject. At some point, that silence would have to end. It was just a matter of time. Naruto gave a soft sigh and decided that he would be the first to speak. "I don't think I'll ever get sick of seeing this when I wake up," She turned her head to look up at him and said, "The view is nice." He agreed, and then he looked down at her and grinned. "But I'd say the view next to me is even more beautiful." Just as he wanted, her cheeks got red. "You and your silver tongue. If you had been this smooth before we got stuck on this island, you could have had a girlfriend back in your village." He thought about what she said for a moment and then tried to remember the girls he knew when he lived in Konoha. He found it strange that he didn't care enough to try to imagine what it would have been like to date any of them. He only thought about the girl right next to him. Maybe being alone had something to do with it. Maybe. He shook his head. "I can't go back in time to see if you're right," he said. "True." When she stopped talking, he raised an eyebrow. Speaking of time, Naruto, I'm curious about how long we've been on this island," she said quietly. "About a month," Naruto said, shrugging. "Why do you ask?" "It doesn't feel at all like a month has gone by," she said, letting out a soft breath as the corners of her lips curled up into a soft smile. "Does it?" "No, not at all," he told her with a smile. What was that saying again? "That time goes by quickly when you're having fun." Naruto nodded. "Yes, that's the one," he said. She gave a soft laugh and then gave him a smirk. "Every day is fun with you, Naruto," she said, squeezing his arm before turning back to look at the jungle. After a few seconds, he did the same. "I can say for sure that every time I wake up and hear you snoring next to me, it makes me smile." When he heard her say that, he smiled. When he woke up in the morning, he knew what a slob he was, so when she told him that she liked that about him, it meant a lot to him. He thought he had to tell her something to show that he felt the same way. He stopped as he thought for a moment about what to say. "I used to hate waking up, you know. I hated it the first few times you dragged me up here, but now, well, I look forward to mornings now. I look forward to sitting here with you and watching the sun rise," she said. "It seems like we've both had the same effect on each other. I used to hate getting up, too. When I told you I wanted to watch the sun rise with you, it was just something I said on the spot." He made a soft, happy sound. "There are good things about being impulsive." That's true. They didn't say anything else because they didn't have anything else to say. This time, she was the one who broke it. "Over the past few days, I've been thinking more." "Oh," he said, looking back at her with a raised eyebrow. She also looked back at him and gave him a nod. "Yeah. Are you up for sharing?" She gave another nod. "I do." He smiled and said, "Then go ahead." She smiled back. "Okay," she said to herself quietly. Then she took a deep breath and spoke. "So, in the past month, I've told you more about myself than I've ever told anyone else. You've seen parts of me that no one else has, and instead of judging me, you accepted me and made me feel good about parts of myself that I used to look down on. Sorry if this seems too serious for a morning chat." He gave her a reassuring smile and told her, "No, it's not. If you think it's important to say it, it's important for me to hear it. You're so nice." She stopped talking as a slight blush crept up her cheeks. "Naruto, I feel so lucky to have you all to myself." He teased her by saying, "Well, I'm the only other person on this island." She laughed at his joke. "Yeah, well." She again started to lose her train of thought, so she quietly cleared her throat and then spoke. "Anyway, I just wanted to say that you've helped me deal with things I didn't think needed to be dealt with. You've helped me see myself in a whole new way," she said. Her words made her smile, and he smiled back. "I used to hate this form because I thought it was weak, frail, and ugly. After hearing all the good things you said about it, I now think it's beautiful, cute, and adorable, and I want to thank you for that." Even though what she said was true, she didn't mention that the main reason she liked this form so much now was because he liked it. "That makes me very happy to hear," he said, reaching up to gently scratch behind one of her ears. She gave a quiet purr, then laughed. "I bet you are, because it's not often that the strongest-tailed beast says something so heartfelt." "You just made my whole day by telling me that," Naruto said to her with a happy smile. "Yes, well, I hope what I'm about to say will make your whole week," she said slowly, squeezing her lips together for a second before saying his name. "Naruto." He quietly took a breath. "Yes, after everything you've done for me. Well, to be honest, I don't even know why I waited this long to tell you. Maybe I just wanted to wait for the right time," she said, making him raise an eyebrow. "But I think you are on the same level as me, and I have been thinking that for a while. You may not be as strong or as old as me, but you are powerful in your own way, and you have shown me that." Slowly, his eyes got bigger as he got what she meant. "So, you're going to tell me your name, right?" "Yes," she said with a sweet smile. "You've earned it." She had to take a second to get over how intensely he was looking at her before she could tell him. "It's Kumiko. That's my name, Naruto." Since she was the nine-tailed fox, he thought it was fitting that her name included the number 9. Since she was from a long time ago, it made sense that her name was long. But he didn't have anything to complain about. He was overjoyed that she had finally put enough trust in him to tell him her name. "Kumiko." He whispered her name as if she were a god or goddess. When she heard him say her name, her blush got worse. "I'm so glad I can hear you say my name, Naruto. I knew it would feel good to hear you say it." After hearing her name, he wanted to take things a step further while she was still in a good mood. He turned his head to the side and asked, "Can I call you Kyumi?" She looked away. "Wait, what?" "Kyumi," repeated Naruto. "I think it's a cute way to shorten your name, don't you? It hasn't even been a minute and you already want to cut it down." She asked in a shocked voice, "Is Kyumiko that long?" Naruto gave a head shake. "No, it's not because your name is too long. I just think, well, since we're so close, wouldn't it be fine to call you by a nickname?" Well, Kyumiko pursed her lips and thought for a moment. "Well, I guess we're close enough that I can deal with you shortening my name. But I hope you don't think I'll call you Naru, because I think that's a silly name." "Yes," he said with a nod. "Then, okay, I guess Kyumi isn't that bad. You did say it was cute." Her voice trailed off, and she buried her face in his arm as her cheeks turned red. "Damn it, Naruto. Only you can make me feel this way. If anyone else had done what you just did, I would have ripped them in half. Even God could come down and call me that, and I would still try to kill him." "Does that mean I'm special, Kyumi?" he asked, gently nudging her with his elbow to get her to look back up at him. Kyumiko took a quiet swallow. "I guess it does." "How unique." "Special enough," she said, squeezing her lips together. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I think there's something I should say, too," Naruto said as he slowly turned to face her with a serious tone. When she saw how angry he looked, she got red in the face. "Well, like you said, if you have something to say, Naruto, I have something to listen to." "I hope I'm not making you feel bad or anything," he said, softening his gaze a little. "Not at all. Even now, you make me feel more at ease than anyone else I've met," she said as she put her hand on his lap. "So if you have something to say, Naruto, please say it. Sorry if it all comes out wrong." Kyumi smiled at him to make him feel better. "I'm sure I'll be able to figure out what you mean no matter what you say." He said, "All right," and then took a deep breath. "We've been friends for a while, but in the last few days, I feel like we've become more." She pursed her lips and asked, "What do you mean?" "Well, remember the first time we met, when my teacher kicked me off that cliff to try to get me to call a giant toad?" She nodded and then gave a small laugh. "I do. I still remember what you were like. You were such a runt, the perfect example of a monkey brat. I was a lot louder back then, and I'm pretty sure the first thing I asked you was if you were willing to give me some of your power," he said, smiling fondly at the memory. She smiled back. "You had such a funny face when I told you no," she said with a sigh of satisfaction. "Teasing you was always fun, and it was the only thing that kept me entertained in that cursed seal." "I bet it was. When I was younger, I might not have liked it, but when I think back on it now, I find it funny." Kyumi laughed and snorted. "When you were younger, you would have ripped off his head." Naruto smiled and said, "Thank goodness it all worked out in the end." He let out a nervous laugh when she said that his head had been ripped off, which made her laugh softly at his exaggerated reaction. "Yes, it did," she said with a snort. "I'm still not sure how that happened. I think that's part of what I'm trying to say, Kyumi," he began, making her raise an eyebrow. "We may have hated each other back then, but being on this island with only each other has brought us much closer together. The first thing you said to me when we got to this island was that I was a stupid monkey. Now, we sit here every morning with your head on my shoulder and watch the sun rise. I don't know how it happened, but you're the closest person I have now. You are, too, Naruto. I don't think I've ever cared about anyone more," she said, her cheeks turning red. "You're so kind, so humble, and so sweet. I couldn't ask for a better person to spend time with on this island. Part of me wishes that everyone could see how you really are. Then they would see that they were wrong all along," he said, pausing for a moment before shaking his head. "But I'm selfish, Kyumi. I'd be jealous if anyone else knew. I want to keep this side of you all to myself. I don't know. I want you all to myself." She tried to speak, but all she could come up with was his name. "Naruto." Naruto put both of his hands on Kyumi's shoulders and said, "I don't think there are words to describe how I feel about you. The more time I spend with you, the closer you get, but I still feel like you're far away." She said his name again, Naruto, and blushed when she felt his strong hands on her thin shoulders. Then she slowly leaned forward and put both hands on his cheeks, which made him blush too. I think there are words to describe how you feel. How we both feel." He made his eyes bigger. Kyumi. Now he was the one who couldn't say anything. "I hadn't expected things to go this fast. I was just going to tell you my name and open up to you a little bit more today," she said, rubbing her thumbs along his whiskers. "I thought it would take a lot longer for this to happen. I would have been more ready, but..." She stopped talking and looked down, hesitating a little as her will failed. He only had to give each of her shoulders a soft, reassuring squeeze to make her feel better. She looked back into his eyes and smiled when she felt sure of herself again. "I guess you can't get ready for things like this, Naruto, especially when it's you." He quietly took a bite. "Kyumi, if you want to wait, you don't have to." "No, Naruto, I need you to know right now." As she talked less, she leaned toward him more and more until there was only an inch between their lips. As she moved closer to him, he slid his hands past his shoulders and wrapped his arms around her upper back as she lifted herself onto his lap. Now that they were so close, they could each feel the other's warm breath on them and smell each other. He thought she smelled sweet like honey with a hint of smoke. She was happy to find that he smelled like the woods when they were close. Even though they didn't say anything for a few moments, they both knew how the other felt because they were looking lovingly into each other's eyes. Even so, she still said it. "I love you, Naruto." As did he. "I love you too, Kyumi." She looked down at his lips as she licked her own, then back up into his eyes. "You're going to kiss me now, right?" Naruto gave her a toothy smile and a snort of amusement before putting one hand on the back of her head and pressing their lips together. Before they finally kissed, they both closed their eyes. The way she held his cheeks made him want to kiss her even more. Neither of them had ever really kissed someone before, but where they were lacking in skill, passion and love quickly filled the gap. Even though their kiss wasn't perfect, this moment was. As things got more heated, he felt more confident and started to run his fingers through her hair and move his other hand down to her lower back. When he touched one of her ears, she made a soft moaning sound against his lips, which made them both blush. The fact that she made such a cute noise seemed to encourage both of them, so they put even more of themselves into the kiss until it got hot and heavy. They kept showing how much they loved each other through this kiss until they were both out of breath. When they finally broke apart, a small trail of saliva connected both of their lips, which made them both blush even more. The first person to get better was Naruto. Kyuume, as she looked into his eyes, she let out a quiet sigh. "I had no idea that a kiss could be like that." "Yeah," he said between breaths. "I'm glad it was you, Naruto, who made me fall in love with him," she said with a warm smile. Naruto gave her a smile in return. "I love you too, Kyuume." "Ugh, I wish you had used my full name when you said that." He made a soft, happy sound. "I love you, Kyumiko." She turned red. "I love you too, Naruto," she said. Things were getting worse. Only a little. From just one kiss, a whole myriad of different loving acts between them had opened up to them. Even though neither of them were really ready for all of that, they were both tempted to just jump right in. It looked like they were both determined to go as far as they could with the things they were doing to each other now. All it would take for one of them to do something is for the other to touch them lightly or look at them in a subtle way. The only thing that stopped them from going all the way was that they were both hopelessly romantic and needed to spend some time together at each stage before moving on to the next. Not that anything was wrong with that. It was kind of like not being able to have sex until you got married or something. When they were both ready, they would take that step forward together. But right now, and Naruto, as they played together in the river, her cute-sounding squeal made him want to splash her even more. Both of them were naked and showing the other their whole bodies, which neither of them cared about. His clothes were all over the place on the smooth rock where Kyumiko used to sit, but she had just disappeared. They had already been in the river for 30 minutes. Even though they were just there to take a bath, things got more interesting when she splashed him playfully. He splashed her back because he thought it would be a good way to have some fun with her. Now, they were having a small water fight between themselves. "Take that," he shouted and splashed her again, but this time he got her right in the face. She squeaked and then splashed back without looking. "Oh, now you're getting it." "Am I?" He dodged and smiled. Kyumiko squealed again as Naruto splashed her again. "You're too good at this, Naruto." Her compliments made him feel proud. He was wrong to be so sure of himself, though, because it gave her a chance to take advantage of him. "What?" He yelled as water from the jet she shot at him got into his eye. Gotcha." Once Kyumiko had the upper hand, she didn't give up. She splashed him over and over, making sure not to use all of her strength so that she didn't hit him so hard that he fell over. Still, because she didn't want to kill him completely in this splash battle, he was able to slowly make his way over to her even though she flooded him with cold river water several times. Naruto said, "I'm going to get you." He then tried to grab her, but his voice was distorted from all the water hitting him, which made her laugh. She started to move away from him and splashed him as well. "It's possible. It'd be easier if you didn't keep splashing me." "Face the challenge, Naruto. Don't run away," says the one running away. "Only because you're trying to catch me. When I catch you," he was interrupted when she sent a splash right to his face. "What are you going to do, So focused on teasing him, she was completely unaware as the subtle sounds of moving water came from behind her. It was only when it was too late that she realized what was happening. Feeling a set of powerful arms snake underneath hers, she felt the hands of her captor clasped behind her head, effectively locking her upper body in place. In such a position with her arms forced outward, her large, bountiful and fat breasts were on full display to him. Droplets of water rolled down from them, reflecting some of the sunlight as it trailed down her body, past her navel, before joining back with the river. "Shadow clone, baby. That's what I'm gonna do," exclaimed Naruto, grinning victoriously at her as water dripped from his drenched blonde hair and face. "See, cheater." She huffed quietly before she tried to squirm her way free. Now of course she could just effortlessly break free, but where was the fun in that? Kyumiko loved these times when she could act as weak as her current form made her look. She would never tell him, but putting herself in these situations where she could act submissive turned her on quite a bit. She put on a fake fight and waited anxiously to see what he would do to her now that she was helpless. Can you really call it cheating if you know I can use shadow clones? He asked as he slowly moved toward her and gave her a smile. You're a ninja, so you should be happy to be called a cheater, Kyumiko told him with her tongue out. He made a soft hum. Huh, I hadn't thought of it that way before. Well, duh. You're not much of a thinker, Naruto, she said with a smirk on the corner of her mouth. Well, at least you have me to make up for that. Yeah, he said, never taking his smile off for a second. Thank goodness for you, Kyuume. She bit her bottom lip, and his honest answer made her cheeks just a little red. She was expecting a response, but it was nice to hear that from him. Hearing him say that had actually made her very happy. So much so that for a moment, she forgot about her lewd plans to get him to play with her. When she did remember, though, she didn't wait to bring it up again by bringing up the fact that she was still in a rather provocative position. So, Naruto, now that you have me like this, what are you going to do to me? She asked innocently, her blush getting deeper as his eyes briefly went to her breasts, and then back to her face. I honestly thought you were just going to kill the clone, he said, taking a few steps toward her. Naruto pursed his lips and kept humming. He then cupped both of her breasts, which made her let out a soft squeak and bend her ears down. Your breasts are really big and heavy, I said. Is it a bad thing? She blew out a hot breath and her cheeks started to turn red. He gave a head shake. No, not at all. His voice trailed off, and he looked over at his shadow clone before calling it back to him. If you want me to stop, Kyuume. No, please keep going. Naruto, she said softly, pressing her breasts together with her forearms and clasping her hands on top of them now that her arms weren't being held back. We're a couple now, so this kind of touch is normal. He slowly nodded and then put his hands on both of her breasts. He thought that they were just as soft as they had always been, so soft that his fingers could easily sink into them with just a little bit of pressure. He moved his hands so that her nipples were pressing against his palms and gave her another squeeze. This time, he squeezed her much harder. Even though she didn't make a sound and only took a quick breath, he could feel her nips getting harder under his hands. When he looked up at her, he could see that she already had a slight haze in her eyes and that her cheeks were starting to flush again. Naruto whispered, your breasts are perfect, and then moved his hands so that his thumbs were pressing on her nipples. Really? Are they? Naruto gave her a friendly smile. They are so soft that it feels great to squeeze them. My fingers sink right into them, and they fit perfectly in my hands. But that shouldn't come as a surprise, Kyuume, since everything about you is perfect. I don't know what feels better, your praise or your hands. She trailed off, blushing more as she was overcome with embarrassment. Why compare? Just enjoy both, he told her as he rubbed the soft pads of his thumbs against her nipples. This made her moan. Kyumiko stutteringly said, you're right, then let out another soft moan as she slowly sank into the water, pulling him down with her. Knees knocking. She gave a slow nod of the head. Yes, even though her breasts were now under the water, he still squeezed and needed them. She realized that the way the warmth from his hands mixed with the coolness of the water was really turning her on. So much so that she had to put her hands on his shoulders for support as she tried not to get any louder. You can be as loud as you want, Kyuume, he told her. This made her blush because she thought he might be able to read her mind. It's just you and me. He had a point. After she was able to nod her head, she closed her eyes and leaned toward him. She opened her mouth and let herself go so she could moan freely. Even though he had only played with her breasts a few times so far, he was already very good at it. He knew most of the places she liked to be squeezed, and he had this great way of doing it on her nipples that made her go crazy. I never thought something so simple could feel so good. Her voice trailed off, and her bottom lip began to quiver as she let out another moan. Naruto moved his body slowly toward her. I think there must be a way to improve this, she said softly. Please, then go ahead, even though she already knew what he was going to do to her. She parted her lips just ever so slightly just before he kissed her. The way her warm breath felt on his lips made him want to try something they'd never done before, use their tongues when they kissed each other. Already excited by his hands, she almost immediately gave in when she felt his warm tongue on hers. It was a very naughty kiss. As he kissed and groped her, his tongue and lips muffled her cries for help. Even though all he did was kiss her and touch her breasts, she was getting so close. So desperately close that where he touched her, she felt like a fire was spreading through her whole body. It was annoying, but she loved this feeling, that strong rush of pleasure right before her inevitable peak. Her inevitable, coming point of no return. Naruto. As she pulled away from the kiss, Kyumiko called out his name. When she finally got there, she tightened her grip on his shoulders, pressed her thighs together, and turned red. He held her up when her legs gave out, helping her stay steady as the waves of pleasure from her intense orgasm came and went. She bit down on her full bottom lip and pressed against him, pressing her sensitive, swollen breasts against his chest and wrapping her arms around his neck. When she was shaking and quivering from her climax, she needed to feel his strong body against hers and feel his warmth. As he held her, he used one of his hands to stroke her back. This made her make a few soft purrs and moans. Naruto spoke up when her breathing went back to normal. "So, Kyumi, how did that go?" "Even better than the last time," she said as she cuddled up to him and hummed a soft, pleasant tune. He smiled and said, "Oh, good." She gave him a smile in return, then leaned forward and put her chin on his shoulder. She was quiet for a while before she spoke. "I can feel you poking my thigh." "Yeah, well," he gave a shrug. "It takes place." Kyumiko blushed. "Naruto, it's so hot and hard. I'm sure that the water will eventually cool it down," he said, pursing his lips. "Why? Why can't I cool it down this time, Naruto?" she asked as she slowly moved back to look at his face. Yes, even though they had already been through a lot together, she hadn't had a chance to show him how much she loved him. She had wanted to make him wiggle and moan ever since the first time he touched her and gave her her first ever orgasm. She knew he wanted it too because whenever she gave him something in return, she could feel him throb against her. Why didn't he just let her go? She had already seen his member. He wasn't even little or anything. He was not small at all, so there was no reason for him to feel bad about it. "Kyumi," she said, "that's not fair, Naruto. I want to touch you too." He put one hand on her cheek and asked, "Are you sure you want to?" He didn't want her to feel like she owed him anything. Kyumiko nodded her head, and as she did so, her cheeks turned a deep shade of red. "I want you to be happy too, Naruto. Please." When he saw the want and desire in her eyes, his cheeks turned red. "All right, Kyumi," finally, she said with a smile, then gave both of his shoulders a gentle squeeze to make him feel better. "I was wondering when you were going to give me a chance. I just needed one last push," he said, but he didn't say it right away. Kyumiko leaned in and gave him a soft kiss on the cheek. "I know how scary it can be to be in a relationship, Naruto. Just being with you makes me nervous, so I can't imagine how you feel. As long as you accept me, Naruto, I will accept you." Naruto said softly, "I just feel like I might be doing something wrong if I start asking you for things like this, Kyumi. I don't want to eventually freak you out or anything," and he pursed his lips. "You won't?" he asked. "How do you know?" with worry in his voice. As she pressed their foreheads together and looked into his eyes, her smile grew. "Because I love you, Naruto. I love you too, Kyumi." She put her hand on his hand that was on her cheek. "Naruto, take me back to land." He held her close to him and smiled at her. As he waded back onto land, she pressed her soft, doughy breasts against his strong chest. As they got closer, he could see that her excitement was making her eyes redder and brighter than they usually were. When he got there, she pushed him down, which was easy for her because she was so strong. "You've been wanting this a lot," she said. "I have," with a sultry trill as her eyes slowly moved down his body and landed on his groin. It wasn't enough to just see it. She wanted to be right next to him. She slowly slid down until her face was right next to his chest. She did this by putting her hands on his chest. Naruto was so long and scary that he could probably lay it across her face lengthwise, and he was so thick that her delicate fingers would just barely be able to wrap around him. He gave off heat and a smell that she found so incredibly sexy that she could get going again with just a sniff, especially when she put her face close to his sack. Even after a few minutes in the water, he was still as hard as a rock, which made her very happy. "What a hunk. You're looking at it so intently," he said as she looked up at him and bit her bottom lip. She opened her mouth to say something, but stopped when he moved. It's so full of life. It's glad to see you," Naruto joked, and she let out a soft giggle. "And I'm glad to see it," Kyumiko said with a smile as she put her fingers around the base of the tree. After that, he kept quiet and kept biting his bottom lip as he watched her make him feel good. Kyumiko started by stroking him with her hands, which were so soft that she quickly used both of them. She ran her hands up and down his body, sometimes changing directions to see what he liked best. She quickly learned from his groan that he liked it best when she had one hand on his base and the other on the rest of him. "Kyumi, that feels great." As she continued to stroke him, the edges of her lips turned up into a soft smile. "I can tell." As she talked, lots of gunk started to come out of his swollen tip. The sleazy substance covered her hands, making them sticky and slick, and made every touch she gave him sound wet and erotic. He was really hurting now, and when her fingers touched one of his more sensitive spots, he would sometimes buck his hips or groan. "Kyumi, tell me, Naruto, where do you want to come?" she asked, squeezing the hand she had wrapped around the base of his cock. He tried to answer, but all he could do was grunt and push his hips into her hands. "I guess it's up to me," she said with a smile. She stood up just a little bit and put her breasts in front of him by sliding one arm under them. She began to stroke him faster as she licked her lips in anticipation. She moved her hand up his whole length and around his head before sliding it back down. She watched as his face contorted with pleasure and his muscles started to flex and tighten, which told her that he was getting closer. "KQ, SHH. Just watch, Naruto. Just watch as you come on my breasts, these breasts that you love so much. He quietly swallowed and turned his head up to look at her. The sweet feeling of her hand moving up and down his length and her sweet, sultry whispers finally pushed him over the edge. As he shook his hips one last time, he felt her hold on him get tighter. This was his climax. His cock hurt as thick ropes of his hot, potent seed came out of it. Most of the seed went where she wanted it to go, on her breasts. She also got some of it on her neck and hand. For a few seconds, neither of them moved as they tried to get back on their feet. She was so amazed by how it looked, smelled, and felt warm against her skin that she actually shivered. She had thought he would come a lot, but not this much. He had thrown his head back against the ground and was working hard to get his breathing back to normal. They didn't say anything as they enjoyed the good feeling of what they had just done. When Kyumiko finally spoke up, the silence was broken. Naruto, that was really hot, she said as her cheeks turned red and she looked down at her breasts, which were full of cum. It was, he said, catching his breath. You came so far. She stopped, bringing the hand she had used to kill him to her lips. I wonder, he quietly breathed out. Puame. Naruto watched as she stuck out her tongue and tentatively licked her hand, taking some of his cum into her mouth. When she tried it, she turned red right away because it was strangely delicious. It was dirty, wild, and just a little bit sweet, and she wanted more. She licked her hand clean and then wiped it off her breasts, humming happily as she cleaned herself up. I'm becoming such a naughty girl for you, Naruto, she said with a blush as she looked up at him after licking herself clean. You better take responsibility. He slowly sat up and let out a quiet groan. He reached out and began patting her on the head, which made her give a soft, happy purr. I'll be sure to. Naruto smiled at her. She pouted all of a sudden. Naruto, I wish you had been louder. He gently lofted a brow. Oh, Kyumiko started by folding her arms under her breasts and saying, when you touch me, I make so many sexual noises. That's embarrassing. I wanted to get back at you. Maybe you will, eventually, he said as he kept running his fingers through her hair. Next time, she said with a sure voice. When he got down on one knee, he put his arms around her and pulled her close to him. I'll be excited about that, she said, and put her hands on his shoulders at the same time. I bet you will, and I bet you can't wait until you can play with my breasts again. He made a soft, happy sound. I do too, Naruto. I'm really looking forward to it, Kyumiko told him, blushing at what she had just said. She then moved closer to him and put her hands behind his neck. When you touch them, it feels great. It felt great when you, she asked, when I made you come on my breasts. His embarrassment made her feel braver. Naruto gave a slow nod of the head. Yeah. After he stopped talking, they were both quiet for a few seconds while they enjoyed their loving embrace. But at some point, Kyumiko decided to say something. You're still tough. Do you want me to do it again? He turned red. I'd like that. She smirked. Sometimes you are very cute, Naruto. You are always cute, Kyumi. Kyumiko hummed quietly. Only because I have someone to be cute for. He took a few deep breaths and then spoke. I love you. Heh, I love you too. There was a short pause. So, what's next? He didn't say anything right away. Yes, could you? Lots of good things had come from exploring the island. From the one bunker they had found, they found a whole network of tunnels that led to all kinds of places on the island. They found all kinds of things, like crates full of random bits and pieces, more spoiled sake, and strange metal devices that looked like tubes with switches on them. Actually, those weren't that interesting, because they didn't know what to think about it all. Plus, when they found the best thing on the island so far, they had almost forgotten about all the other things. It was a hot spring in the ground. A natural hot spring surrounded by tasty fruit trees and close to a beautiful clearing big enough for them to build another shelter. Also, it was close enough to the river that they could drink hot or cold water whenever they wanted. After all the dirty tunnels they had to crawl through, it was like heaven had opened up and welcomed them in. The whole trip was worth it because they got to spend time together, but finding that beautiful, steamy spring made it even better. They wanted to enjoy this great find for as long as they could. So, for the first few days, they didn't even dare put a toe in its healing waters, let alone step in. Kyumiko had decided to wait a while before using the hot spring because she knew that as soon as they got in, they would be hooked on the feeling of hot water after being on the island for so long without it. Naruto had at first said no, but a few soft kisses and sweet looks were all it took to change his mind. After all, she did have that power over him. But now that those few days were over, they could finally go to the hot spring and have fun. Naruto said, "Uo," as he shivered and slowly lowered himself into the hot water of the spring. As she watched him, Kyumiko let out a soft, amused snort. She had let him go in first. That's how good it feels, huh? Yes, it does, he said with a sigh as he slid himself closer to the hot spring and rested his shoulders and the back of his head on the smooth rocks nearby. I feel like I'm going to melt. When Kyumiko put her toe in the water, she moaned, "It can't really be that gross. See, that's how good it is." She got red in the face as she slowly went down into the water. It really does. She said the last word slowly, pausing just a little bit on the last syllable because she was so happy. And I thought I was being dramatic, he said with a quiet laugh as he moved slowly toward her. Naruto, it's been almost a century since I've enjoyed a hot spring, she said softly, making a sound like his earlier soft sigh. Naruto replied with a hum. I guess that could make it more intense for you. Kyumiko said to Naruto, "You know, Naruto." Her nervous voice made Naruto raise an eyebrow. "Maybe the reason it hurts so much when you touch me is because I'm a few thousand years old and you're the first person to ever touch me that way," he said. He asked, "Is that a bad thing?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Naruto, not at all." "Well," Naruto stopped for a moment to catch his breath. "When you first used your hand, it was really intense for me because I hadn't really touched myself since we got to this island because at first I didn't give you any privacy. And now because you have me to do it for you," she asked as she slowly walked over to where he was sitting and smiled at him. "Yeah." He smiled back at her with red cheeks. She sat down next to him and hummed a sweet note that sounded like a song. She wrapped one of her arms around one of his, and as she rested her head on his shoulder, she pushed her big, round, and full breasts against him. In response, he kissed her cheek and tucked some stray strands of her silky orange hair behind her ear with his free hand. When his fingers touched one of her ears, she let out a quiet purr. This made him want to go a little further and give her some nice ear scratches, which made her eyes roll back and start moaning. "And Naruto," Kyumiko's voice trailed off. He turned his head and started nibbling on her other ear, which made her moan again. "Wow, that's different," he said between bites. "Your ears are always so sensitive." Kyumiko nodded slowly. They are. Are you the most sensitive person there?" He whispered into her ear before going back to nibbling on her fingers. I don't know, Naruto. I don't know what part of me is the most sensitive." His lips were licked. "Would you like to know?" When she heard him whisper those words in her ear, she shivered because he had said them in such a strange way. She could feel the heat that she had grown used to after all those wonderful intimate moments with him rising quickly in that spot just below her navel, which she now knew was her womb, and on her cheeks as she blushed. With the steam from the spring rising up in front of them, she couldn't tell if the slight haze in the air was from the steam or from her growing desire. "Yes," she said, and her blush got deeper as he slowly moved his hand from her ear to her cheek and then cupped it. "Naruto, you're a lot smoother now." He made a proud smirk with the corner of his mouth. I think it's time I caught up," she said with a smirk of her own as she moved to sit on his hips. His eyes grew wide at her sudden boldness. "Naruto, don't you think?" When she felt how stiff he had gotten when he was trying to be nice to her, her smile wavered for a moment. He was so hard that it took almost all of her willpower to keep from shaking again. Just having his big, hot, and manly cock so close to her special place made her need it more. Kyumiko held herself there for a few seconds as she calmed herself. Then, without warning, she put her hands behind his neck, slid down slowly, and pressed her large breasts against his strong chest. Naruto rewarded her hard work by letting out a soft groan when he felt the top of his member slide into the tight, smooth space between her big, round balls. Now it was his turn to blush, and he could feel his cheeks getting red. He finally said, "I feel like it doesn't really matter what I think right now, Kyumi." She gave him a sly grin. "You have just as much power over me as I do over you, Naruto, but it looks like I've taken all of it away from you right now." "It does." He put his hands on her hips and squeezed them both hard, making her bite down on her bottom lip. "So, Kyumi, how do you want to handle this?" She licked her lips in a seductive way before slowly pulling them apart. "I'd like to do something different." Naruto's brow went up. "Oh, I want to talk," I said. His blush got worse. "Oh, please," she asked in a sweet voice, tilting her head to give him a look of innocence and desire as she slowly rubbed her behind against his. Naruto swallowed quietly, but that didn't help him think of anything to say. He couldn't do anything but slowly nod. He didn't know what to say, so he let her lead him up onto one of the big, flat, smooth stones that surrounded the hot spring. Then he watched as she put her small, delicate hands on his knees and moved his legs apart so she could slide between them. He could feel her excitement move through her body in waves as she licked her full lips at the sight of his cock in front of her. As she got closer to him, her excitement mixed with his. "I've been dreaming about this for a long time," he said, blushing again. She looked up into his eyes and then smiled softly at him. "Then let me make your dream come true, my love." "Oh, darling, I actually like that a lot," Naruto said, smiling back. I've been thinking for a while about what else to call you, Kyumiko said as she tilted her head to the side and started nuzzling her cheek against his inner thigh. Like honey or darling, my dearest was the one I liked the most. That makes sense, he said, letting out a shaky breath as he tried not to move around. I wouldn't mind if you used all three, because each one has its own charm. They do. Kyumiko's voice trailed off as she slowly leaned forward and pressed her face against his cock. Your thing has a charm, too, Naruto. It draws me in, seduces me in its own way, and turns me into a lewd girl just for you. As he watched her, he let out a shaky breath. God, you're so big, Naruto. Look at how your thing reaches all the way to my forehead when I put my chin on you. And the smell. She paused as she took a soft breath, then took a much deeper one. It could make me drunk. Naruto would never tell her this, but he thought she looked sexiest when her face was pressed against his cock. Just the way her eyes would get half closed, her cheeks would get red, and she would wear a hazy smile was enough to drive him crazy. Part of him wanted to just grab her by the sides of her head and force himself into her mouth and down her throat. He wanted to feel her choke and gag on him. The part that won him over, though, was when she said she worshipped his cock and praised it. Kyumi, he said in a loud, almost impatient voice as he slowly put one hand on top of her head. Sorry to keep you waiting, Naruto, she said with another smile, then moved her hand and wrapped her delicate fingers around the base of his cock. All this steam is making me feel dizzy. She pulled herself up until her wet, full breasts were out of the water. Then she leaned in closer to him and kissed his sensitive head. In response, his thing twitched and started dripping that delicious stuff that she had grown to love from its tip. She then gave it a few licks, which made his breathing speed up as he got more and more excited. When she started to swirl her wet, soft, and warm tongue on his tip, it took all of his strength not to move his hips. That feels really good, Kyumi, he said as he ran his fingers through her silky orange hair and tucked it behind her ear. She let out a moan of pleasure, which he took as a sign of approval. She took the head of his cock into her mouth after he praised her. She put her full lips over it and then started to play with her tongue. Naruto could only throw his head back and groan when he felt her tongue start to work. She moved it around his head, up and down that sensitive spot at the base of his head, and sucked on it to get more of his saliva out. She then began to stroke him with her hands, much to his delight, because she wanted more and better from herself. After she took his tip out of her mouth, she said, Your cock is delicious. He asked, Is it really? Well, yours is, she said with a smile. He slowly put his hand on her head because he felt brave. Kyumi, please go back to sucking. She laughed out loud. Okay, Naruto. I'll do anything for you, my dear. Kyumiko put her lips back on his sensitive head and wrapped her fingers from both hands around the base of his cock. She then tried to go as deep as she could with him. She heard him take a breath as she put more and more of him in her mouth. She stopped when she felt like she was going to throw up. She kept him there while her throat calmed down by closing her eyes and stroking him with her hands. When she looked up at him, she couldn't help but smile when she saw that he was happy. Wow, he let out a gasp. She knew what to do because she could tell from the sounds he made what he liked the most. She quickly figured out that he liked his blowjobs like his handjobs, with one of her hands wrapped around his base. She started bobbing her head up and down on his cock, making sure to caress him with her tongue while holding it steady with one hand and fondling and caressing his heavy sack with the other. She sucked so hard that her cheeks went down, and when he groaned at how hard she was sucking, it made her chest swell with pride. Tea that feels great, Kyumi, Naruto stuttered as he tried not to cough. His breathing was shallow and his pulse was fast. Now, he was so close. He could feel everything she did to him, even the smallest touches. From the way she squeezed the base of his cock to the sweet feeling of her plump lips sliding up and down his shaft to the way her warm tongue slid and swirled around his sensitive tip. He could feel it all. As his members started to grow inside her warm, welcoming mouth, he felt a tightness he could never have imagined. She sped up, making him bite down on his lip as all of those great feelings got stronger. Unkicking, Kyumiko thanked him by humming, which gave him more energy as he started to buck his hips and press himself against her throat. When he finally came, the muscles in his legs and stomach tightened up. As he erupted inside her mouth, his cock hurt and he rolled up some of her hair in his hand. She moaned rudely as several thick ropes of his hot, potent seed shot onto her tongue, throat, and the insides of her cheeks. She sucked him hard and swallowed his poop whenever she could to make his orgasm last as long as possible, which was good for both of them. He fell back with her still between his legs and let out a heavy breath, then a few soft moans. She kept bobbing her head, but now that he had finally come, she did it more slowly. Kyumi, she slowly got off of her cock, making sure to keep the suction going the whole time until she could finally let him go. Naruto. God, he said out of breath as he put his arm over his eyes. Wow, that was too good. I'm glad you had fun, my dear, Kyumiko said as she climbed over him and smiled softly at him when they were face to face. Even though he was trying to catch his breath, Naruto was able to smile back. You're amazing, Kugumi. Yes, I am, she said with a smile that slowly turned into a proud smirk. But don't you think that you're even more amazing, Naruto? He asked. How so? You're in love with the most powerful tail beast in the world, Kyumiko told him with a fox-like grin. She then sat down and nuzzled her cheek against his chest. And you made her like you so much that she voluntarily turned into your naughty little vixen. As he blushed, he could feel his face getting hot. Well, now that you say it that way, Kugumi, she said. I'm glad you see it my way now, she said softly as she moved one of her hands from his shoulder to one of his toned side muscles. He hummed softly as he stretched and closed his eyes. Kugumi. Yes. Naruto moved one arm around her lower back and reached down with the other to grab one of her butt cheeks firmly. Are you ready to go? Are you going to use your mouth too? She asked, her cheeks turning red as he squeezed her round behind. Of course, he said in a rough voice, making her blush even more. Then he rolled them over so he was on top and she was under him. Kyumiko bit the bottom of her lip. Your voice is starting to grow on me. Really? She gave him a reassuring smile and a nod of her head. I think it's very hot. In response, Naruto moved one of his hands up to cup Kyumi's cheek and said, I'm still nowhere near as hot as you are. I'm the luckiest person in the world, I said. Definitely. Are you going to keep talking, Naruto, or are you going to kiss me? She asked with a toothy grin. Naruto then slid his other hand under her head and leaned forward as he laughed and snorted. When he kissed her, she kissed him back by parting her lips just enough so he could use his tongue if he wanted to and putting both her hands on his shoulders. He led her to tilt her head to the side, and when she did, he slipped his tongue into her mouth, as if he didn't care what had been in there just a few minutes earlier. But it looked like she cared a lot more than he did because her eyes grew wide when he did it. But they quickly closed again as she melted into the kiss. As he kept kissing her, Kyumiko was moaning and didn't even know it. She didn't mind if this was how they were going to spend the rest of the day. His lips were so firm and seemed to fit so well with hers. But as he slowly moved away from it and started to move those wonderful lips down her body, she knew they were going to do a lot more, and she was excited about it. I know you wanted to find out which part of me was the most sensitive, but, Naruto, dearest, there's only one place I want you to focus on right now, she said shyly as she slowly spread her legs for him. Her body flushed wherever he kissed it. Please, you're so hot when you act like that, he said, licking his lips as he put his lower half in the water of the hot spring and put himself between her legs. When I act all submissive for you, my dear, she asked, the corners of her lips curling up in a wanting smile as she lifted her legs into the air. Her delicate folds spread out in the same way, showing him that they were a soft pink color. Naruto put both of his hands between her thick thighs and pulled her hard toward him. This made her squeak in surprise. Yes, Uo, she said, embarrassed by how bold he was. As he went deeper into the water, he moved his hands so they were on her inner thighs. He leaned forward and put his head between her legs while her legs were spread out. He wanted to dive right in because she smelled so sweet and enticing. But he also wanted to enjoy her as much as she had enjoyed him. She was getting aroused just by him looking. Her cheeks were flushed, and this clear, thin, and slimy liquid had begun to ooze out from her slit, down her taint and then her asshole. Some of it even managed to drip down onto the stone that she was lying on. He looked up at her and asked, "You're that excited, huh?" She nodded her head, and as she did so, her blush got stronger. Why, yes. It was such a sweet and honest answer that he blushed as well. With a soft chuckle, he pressed his fingers against her inner thighs. This caused his fingers to sink into her fat thighs and her sex to spread even more, showing her clit and tight slit. He then tilted his head forward, swallowed quietly, and gave her a soft kiss from the bottom of her sex to her clit. She made a soft moaning sound and moved her hands up to the bend of her knees to hold her legs back as she bent them. This gave him even more room to work. She said, and her eyes got all swollen and lusty. He gave her another lick because she tasted good and made a cute noise. Then, he moved his hands around her legs to her hips, pressed his lips against her sex, and started running his tongue up and down her delicate folds. She bit her bottom lip and squeezed her eyes shut as soon as the pleasure hit her. Not being able to see made it even hotter for her. Not being able to use one of her senses made everything he did to her feel even stronger. As he kept working on her with his tongue and lips, she was now panting and her breaths were hot and labored. Kyumiko moaned when he started to look at her clit. He was gentle with it. He caressed it with his lips and swirled it around with his tongue. She thought it would be too intense, but he did everything so well that it was like magic. As he brought her closer and closer to her climax, she could feel the fire growing inside her and spreading to every part of her body, even her fingers and toes. She thought she could last longer, but he found the perfect rhythm so quickly and kept it up so well that her eyes were about to roll back into her head and she was about to pass out. And Naruto, I am coming. She threw her head back and thought, I can't hold back now. When her legs tightened around his head, they moved on their own. When her orgasm hit, she started shaking as she squeezed him between her big thighs. As she came in hard, a strong surge went through her, and she let out a loud cry of pleasure. As she reached her peak, her whole body turned red, her back arched, and her toes curled. Her naughty honey leaked out during her sex, coating the bottom half of his face and her inner thighs and leaving a sweet scent on him. Love. As her muscles started to relax, her legs slowly sank back down. As she tried to calm down, her chest continued to heave, making her heavy breasts rise and fall with each breath. She had thought that doing something as wonderful as this would give her the patience she needed to wait until they were both ready to go all the way together. It did nothing but make the fire inside her burn hotter. She was really becoming a naughty girl for him. It's my turn to say it, he said, lifting the corner of his mouth. You taste delicious, Kuyumi. As she slowly looked up at him, Kuyumiko's cheeks turned red. Do I now? You do, Naruto said, picking up some of her poop from his chin and licking it off his finger. Her blush deepened. I wonder if it's as hot for you to watch me eat your seed as it was for me when you did that just now. He laughed and let out a snort. It is. She stopped talking as she put her head back down on the grass. So far, that was the best. Kuyumi, do you need help to get back into the water? Yes. I've been shaking so much that my legs have gone numb, she said, making him laugh. When she told him the truth, he smiled and moved closer to her, then picked her up in his arms. He carried her over to a less dirty part of the hot spring and lowered them both into the water there. The first thing she did was let out a happy sigh, while he just closed his eyes. When he finally let her go, she stayed close to him and put her cheek on his chest, which made him go ahead and put his arms around her again. As he looked down at her, he said, You're so affectionate when we do things like this, Kuyumi. When he kissed the top of her head, she purred softly and said, It's your fault I'm like this. All the pleasure just makes my brain stop working. Naruto gave her a squeeze. Mine too, Kuyumi. It's a good thing I don't think too much anyway. Kuyumiko let out an amused snort. You might not, but I do, but I don't use it when I'm with you, so I guess it's not so bad. That was so corny. Yeah, well, what would you have said? I love you. She turned red. Yeah, well, I love you too, Naruto, she said. She couldn't help but smile when she felt his soothing warmth as he slept next to her. Naruto slept very deeply for a ninja, which meant that she could touch, caress, and even lick him without waking him up. She thought he was very handsome when he was awake and had that look of determination on his face. And when he was sleeping, she saw a cuter, more vulnerable side of him. She could tell at a glance whether the dreams he was having were good or bad. When he had a good dream, he would smile, but when he had a bad one, he would furrow his brow. Right now, she could tell from the way he was licking his lips that he was dreaming about ramen, or about something that had to be licked a lot. Still, she would sometimes wake up to see him with a tight face and a furrowed brow, which she knew meant he had a bad dream. Her smile started to fade. They would leave just as quickly as they came, and when he woke up, he would be back to his normal, happy self. She could tell he was having a bad dream, but she had no idea what it was about. She hadn't asked him yet because she was afraid of seeing his sweet smile slowly disappear. Kuyumiko knew that if she really loved Naruto, she would have to ask him out at some point. It was just as much her job as it was his to make sure her partner was happy. She would ask him when it was right, and if there wasn't, she would just do what he did and say it out loud. Naruto was impulsive, but if there was one thing that made up for it, it was that he always had the best intentions for her and for those he had left behind. Maybe that's why he kept having bad dreams. Maybe he forgot about them. Well, he did it for sure. She knew that he knew a lot of the other monkeys in the group. All those people he knows. When she broke out of the seal, she took them from him. It's possible that wasn't even the worst thing she's done to him. Kuyumiko took a shaky breath as a bitter sense of guilt started to rise up in her chest. It was such a strange feeling that she almost freaked out at first. She would say that the feeling was like being suffocated, chewed up, and terrible. She felt a little bit better when she looked at Naruto, but mostly she just felt worse. She squeezed her eyes shut and leaned against him, doing her best to forget, or escape, all the bad feelings she was having after finally coming to that long overdue realization. Oh, Naruto. She had changed because she loved him. She didn't recognize herself anymore, even less so when she thought about who she was before she got stuck on this island. Back then, she rarely felt so disgusted by her own actions that she recognized her own selfishness or thought about anyone other than herself. They had thought of her as many things, including nature's punishment, an evil monster, and a god. Naruto had no trouble getting past all the shallow labels she had given herself and finding the real person she had been hiding. Maybe he fell in love with her because he saw something good in her despite all the flaws she once thought were her best qualities. It made me laugh. She liked herself less and less the more she liked him. When they were just getting to know each other, she worried about whether or not he was good enough for her. Now she worried about whether she would ever be good enough for him. All those years ago, the old man had warned her about this. He had told her that she would have to go through the necessary pain of growing up if she ever wanted to feel the joy, hope, and happiness that can only come from true love. When I knew that, this pain didn't hurt as much. She knew she really loved Naruto because she felt it. She really loved him. As her smile came back, the corners of her lips began to turn up just a little bit. Right now, all she wanted was for him to wake up so she could tell him over and over again that she loved him and so she could hold him and hug all the feelings she couldn't say into him. As the sun slowly rose, she thought it wouldn't be long before he woke up and she could do all those things to him. He said, shifting his body just a little as he finally started to move. Naruto, sweetheart, wake up, she said softly as she put a gentle hand on his cheek to help him wake up. When he finally saw her, he slowly opened his eyes and smiled. Morning, Kyumi. She smiled back and gently pinched his cheek. Good morning, Naruto, she said. He asked as he rubbed his eyes, is it too late for me to watch the sun rise with you? Just a little, she said, lowering her hand slowly and brushing it along the bend in his neck before putting it on his arm. I don't care, because spending my mornings cuddled up against you is just as nice. The smile on Naruto's face became a grin. I do too, Kyumi. She said with a happy sigh. Naruto, I really like your smile, and I hope I never forget it. Then I'll be sure to smile more, he said, and she laughed at how excited he was. She gently squeezed his arm before reaching her hand down to hold his. If you smile at me all the time, you'll end up breaking my heart. I can only handle so much of that feeling in my chest. How does it make you feel? Bish, you're making me spell it out. She trailed off, the corners of her lips curling up into a smile as she leaned closer to him. Naruto, it's love. There, are you happy? Naruto's blue eyes sparkled like he was about to burst with happiness, and his smile got even bigger. Very. Kyumiko blushed. Oh, Naruto. You know, he said, cupping her cheek with one hand. I never really thought that my life would turn out this way. She said sarcastically, well, you did magically teleport to some random island. He laughed and then moved closer to her. Yeah, well, I meant falling in love. After I got over my crush on Sakura, I put that kind of thing out of my mind. These days, all I can think about is you. I never really thought I would experience love. I was too great, too powerful, too grand. Being in this form has humbled me. I don't want to go back, Naruto, Kyumiko said, swallowing quietly as her cheeks slowly began to heat up. But I feel like, if I ever had the power to, I would go back. Oh, he cocked his head. She nodded. If I could go back in time, I would have done everything to make you as happy as you are now, from birth to adulthood to old age. I still remember the times I laughed at your misfortune, and it disgusts me to think that I once saw you like that, she said, closing her eyes and tilting her head forward to press her forehead against his chin. That's all in the past, he said softly as he bent down and kissed the top of her head. I don't even remember much about my childhood, so Kyumi, you don't have to worry about me being sad about it. She hesitated and stopped when she couldn't get her words out. Slowly, Naruto moved back and looked at her. Kyumi, I still feel guilty, he said. Kyumi, think about it this way, which made her open her eyes and look up at him. There's always time to change and become the person you want to be. Just because you did all those bad things in the past doesn't mean you can't change and do good things now. She agreed and said, you're right. Half right, anyway. I'm going to be honest, Naruto, I only care about you. I really couldn't care about the other monkeys. If he was still the same person he was when he first got stuck on the island, what she just said would have made him sick. After being with her for a few months, hearing those words made him feel special, loved, and cared for. Being with her had made him a little bit more self-centered. Kyumi, Naruto said to her with a smile, then put his arm around her waist. She gave him a smile in return. Knowing that you still love me despite everything I've done to hurt you calms my racing heart. But when you look at me, it starts racing again. He just said, I love you. And when you say things like that, Kyumiko got red in the face. Maybe if my breasts weren't so big, you'd be able to feel my heart beating faster in response to your words if they weren't so big. When she laughed at him, he said, well, that might be true. But I kind of like how big your breasts are. You guys love big breasts, don't you? Are you guilty? Kyumiko giggled. You know, Naruto, I used to think my breasts were disgusting. And so glad you like them. Well, Kyumi, I like everything about you, he replied. Your breasts, your face, your other parts, all of you. Your parts are good, too, she said in a cheesy way. Anyway, do you think we should get up? He hummed. Why are you in such a hurry? Kyumiko closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh as she said, I guess there isn't any. Shall we sleep in? We will, he said, grinning. She put her arms around him and made herself comfortable. Good. Since they had nothing else to say, at least for now, they leaned against each other and relaxed. She buried her face in his strong chest, and he rested his chin on the top of her head. She felt safe in his arms, like nothing could hurt her as long as he held her. He thought he was the protector and that she was the one he wanted to look out for. Even though it wasn't their plan, they both ended up falling back asleep and waking up in the late afternoon. Even after they woke up, they stayed stuck to each other for another hour on their makeshift bed of leaves until Naruto finally got Kyumiko to stop sticking to him and get up. I am starving, he said finally as Kyumiko lazily got out from their hut. She rubbed her eyes, her energy from before having seemingly disappeared because of those extra hours of sleep she had gotten. I could also use something. What would you like? Asked Naruto. Meat, she said as she stretched and let out a soft groan. I'd hunt, but this form is horrible at it. So, fish and fruit again. Kyumiko shrugged. I guess. But, Naruto, don't you ever get bored with so little change? Well, I guess I did eat ramen almost every day when I was younger, he said with a shrug. Right? She stopped talking as she moved toward him. Do you ever wish you could eat ramen again? Sometimes, Naruto told her with a smile as he reached up and scratched her ear briefly. There are many things I miss. Her face got just a little bit tighter, and her ear twitched when she felt something. Do you now? Not as much as I used to. But yeah, he said, reaching down to cup her cheek with his hand. I've got you now, Kyumi, and I could never give you up to go back. She turned red. You and the things you say. Oh, that wasn't too corny for you? He asked. Kyumiko shook her head. No, there was just enough cheese. He laughed and said, heh, then took her hand. So, fish or fruit, or both? Most certainly both. Then both it is. Breakfast was probably the most peaceful time of their lives together. It became a tradition when they would just hang out and enjoy each other's company while watching the sun rise. Sometimes, that quiet peace went with them to breakfast. What they ate today was pretty much the same as what they ate every other day, longans, apples, and raw and cooked fish. She liked her fish raw, but he liked his fish cooked. They would sometimes eat from each other's plates, but they knew when and how much to take. They knew each other's limits and respected them, which made them both happy. When Kyumiko ate the last piece of fish on her plate, it was the end of their small but wonderful meal together. She liked to eat just as much as he did, but she made a bigger deal of it than he did. He broke the silence by asking Kyumi as he watched her lick her fingers clean. I wonder if you love food or me more. Of course you, she said with a soft pout. Why ask it all? His grin got a little bigger. I just wanted to hear what you had to say. Do you love ramen more than me? Definitely you, Kyumi, Naruto said in reply, reaching out to touch her cheek with his fingers. I'd rather have you than ramen any day of the week, but it wouldn't hurt to have both. Kyumiko let out an amused snort. Can you remember even how ramen tastes? He shrugged his shoulders and said, kind of. She hummed softly as a provocative question came to mind. The corner of her mouth slowly turned up into a smirk. Her smile got just a little bit bigger before she split her lips. My dear, what tastes better, ramen or me? Naruto turned red. Well, she asked with a sweet smile, but her red cheeks gave away the calm and attractive front she was trying to put up. He finally said, you taste sweet. Kyumiko's brow went up. Sweet, me, very, you taste lewdly sweet, Naruto said as he nodded his head and his cheeks rose to his ears. Her blush deepened. Is that something bad? She gave a head shake. No, not at all. I really like ... just let's say ... change the subject, Naruto. Heh, he said, amused by the fact that his girlfriend's attempt to flirt made her feel bad. Okay, Kyumi, what's a good subject? Kyumiko watched as he put his hand under his chin and made a typical pose for thinking. It was so Naruto that she almost laughed out loud. Some people might have called him dumb, but she thought he looked pretty cool at the time. She would have thought the first one at some point, though. Now, he was adorable in every way. In that way, he was almost perfect, but not quite. On the other hand, what's up, Naruto? The sudden change in her tone made him raise an eyebrow. Yes, Kyumi, I still feel guilty. What do you? Naruto's voice trailed off, so he sat down next to her. Does it have anything to do with what we talked about before? Kyumiko slowly nodded her head. Yeah. Then he put an arm around her shoulders and said, let's talk about it. Tell me more about what's making you upset. She opened her mouth to talk, but when she realized she didn't have much to say, she shut it again. She might find it funny in the future that she had all these thoughts in her head but didn't say a single word. Still, even though she was taking her time, he waited patiently, giving her a reassuring smile and a gentle squeeze on the shoulder every so often. She didn't realize her heart was beating really fast for about a minute. Before she finally spoke, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath to calm down. Love is so complicated, Naruto, she said, turning her head to look at him after a quiet sigh. You were so kind to me this morning, and you reassured me as much as you could. But I still feel like I need to do something, anything, to make up for what I did to you. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just go back to how I was, but then I look over at you, and it becomes clear to me again that all these pains, these pangs of guilt that hit me from the inside, are worth it. Tsuame, his eyes became more gentle. Because I love you so much, Naruto, they are worth it. As he bent forward and pressed their foreheads together, the corners of his lips turned up into a warm smile. I love you too, Kyumi. Am I enough? She asked. I've taken away so much from you, your friends, your home, your dream, and caused you so much pain. He didn't think twice before answering. Yes, Naruto. He slowly moved back and said, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Even though it hurts, you still love me. Even though it hurts me, I still love you, Kyumi. When I first started having feelings for you, I was scared. I was scared of what that meant about me and how being on this island had changed me. But now, Kyumi, just knowing that you love me as much as I love you is all I need and all I want. So, please don't ever think that you aren't enough or that you aren't worth it. As she listened to him talk, her eyes slowly got bigger and her bottom lip started to quiver. Tiny tears started to form on her eyelids. Even though his words may have been awkward, she understood what he was trying to say. When he hugged her back, she closed her eyes and gave him a tight hug. She asked him quietly, what did I do to deserve you? He gently squeezed her shoulder. I could ask you the same thing. As she kept hugging him, a happy tear slowly rolled down her cheek. Now that he had forgiven her, his warmth seemed to comfort her even more. As they sat there in each other's arms in silence, she could still feel the ghosts of the guilt that had been bothering her just a few minutes before. However, she could also feel that they were quickly going away. She would have never been able to go through this if she hadn't just said what she was feeling. Somehow, they had gotten even closer, even though they were already close. She thought there was nowhere else to go. But then he jumped out of nowhere and pushed her forward into his strong, wonderful arms. She turned his head and pressed her cheek against his chest as she melted into him. I love you, Naruto. I love you too, Kyumi. She laughed out loud at how quickly he answered. I'm sorry that we had such a heavy conversation to start the day. Don't worry about it. I'm glad you trust me enough to tell me these things, Naruto said as he reached up to stroke her head. I'm happy. Just happy. He smiled and then sighed with happiness. Me too, Kyumi. How did she get him to agree to do it again? Oh yeah. She had given him a lot of kisses, hugs, and sweet looks. She had done other things, some of which were very naughty, to get him to go on this trip with her. See, he was perfectly happy just hanging out at their new place with the fancy onsen and the great leaf hut. But it seemed like she had a sudden need for adventure and wanted him to help her scratch it. He would have been happy to scratch her itch if it was normal or perverted, but not this kind. He might have become a slob because he did nothing all the time. But all he wanted to do was hang out with his girlfriend. Was that asking too much? He looked at his sore feet as if he thought they would tell him something. Obviously, he did not get one. After all, they were just his feet. Just these poor feet, which hurt from all the walking he had done so far. He wasn't just going for a walk, he was going up the side of a mountain. From that cozy place they had made in the jungle, they had gone through several kilometers of thick vegetation and were now climbing a freaking mountain. He made a quiet grunt as he pressed his lips together and forced his leg up to climb a slightly steep ledge. Was it just him, or did it seem like it was getting harder and harder for him to move like he used to? It didn't work as well as it used to when he pumped chakra into his legs. It was, as Shikamaru might put it, troublesome. Tilting his head up, he saw Kyumiko skipping along ahead of him. She was as lively as ever, even more so than he was at the moment. She was humming to herself as she enjoyed the sun on her back and the slightly cooler mountain air flowing through her silky, orange hair. God, she was pretty even from behind. He was so lucky to find a woman as beautiful and funny as she was. Being with this kind of person meant that giving his all was the least he could do to win her favor, but he didn't mind, because he loved her. He caught up to her a little bit by forcing himself to hike quickly up a few rocky steps. As she walked, he reached out to put his hand on her shoulder, but missed. "Gah, my legs are numb," he said as he pulled his hand back to wipe some sweat off his forehead. She turned her face toward him. "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto gave her a smile and said, "Yeah, I'm just a little tired. I haven't had to move so much in a very, very long time. I forget that you normal people have to keep moving to stay in shape," Kyumiko said as she slowed down long enough for him to catch up to her. "However, I can still see through your shirt that you have about the same amount of muscle as you did before." The way she stopped talking made him raise an eyebrow. "Kyumi, I'm sorry, I was just admiring," she said with a sly grin. When he figured out what she meant, he blushed. "I wonder if this is how you feel when you catch me staring at your chest or behind." He said this with his cheeks still red. She was happy. "No, I don't want you to look at me like that anymore. It just makes me feel happy. Happy. Maybe proud is a better word. Proud. Happy. Maybe I just like it when you look at me," Kyumiko said as she held out her hand to him and shrugged her shoulders. When she smiled at him, Naruto took her hand and squeezed it as soon as their fingers touched. Her hand was so small and delicate that he felt like he could break it if he wasn't careful. But he knew the opposite was true. Kyumiko could kill him with her pinky finger if she wanted to. Lucky for us, she didn't. He turned his head to look at her and asked, "So, does that mean I should look at you even more? You should do a lot more things to me," she replied with a wink and a nudge of her elbow to his side. "You might want to try some new things with me, too." He could feel his cheeks getting warmer again. "Huh? Like what, Kyumi?" Now it was her turn to be embarrassed. What she said was supposed to make his face turn red and make him quiet in a cute way. She hadn't planned for him to ask her a question back, which was a bit of a mistake because the question she had asked would have made him answer. Now, as she walked in silence, she could feel that the power between them was shifting away from her and toward him. Oh, how things had turned around. She trailed off as her blush slowly spread to the sides of her face. "I mean," Naruto smiled and pushed her back as he asked, "What do you mean?" She was sad. "You know what I mean, sweetheart. Don't make me say it. I still want to keep some of my modesty." He softly hummed, and his smile grew a little wider when he realized that she was using the word darling to win him over, which it did. He then let out a soft sigh. "All right, Kyumi, I won't make you say it." "You won't," he replied. "Well, now that you say that, I kind of want to." "I think you also want to tell me," he said. Kyumiko gently bit down on her full bottom lip and then slowly nodded. "Somewhat. I think what you're about to say is going to be lewd." She nodded again. "Why, yes. I wonder what people would think if they knew I could make the famous nine-tailed fox stutter," he thought, and then decided to change the subject to help her. Kyumiko puffed out her cheeks at him and said, "I'd be ruined. But, if you insist." "Oh?" He cocked his head. Kyumiko shrugged her shoulders. "Why should I care what monkeys think about me? If I wanted to, I could kill them all with my pinky finger." "Yours is the only monkey's opinion I care about, Naruto," she said firmly as she squeezed his hand. When he heard her say that, he just couldn't help but smile. "That is very nice. If you think about it, you're kind of a race traitor because you're betraying your fellow monkeys to be with me," Kyumiko said, tilting her head to look up at him. "Well, if you think about it, I'm pretty much a hero since I beat the nine-tailed fox when so many others had failed," he said in response. She said, "SHH," and smiled at him. "So far, the only thing you've won over is my heart. My body is still mostly unconquered. Most of the time." When Kyumiko blushed, her cheeks turned a cute shade of pink. "Maybe, Naruto, after we get to the top of the mountain. Once we get to the top or once we get down." He asked her straight out, making her blush even more. "And perhaps we can talk about it after." Naruto let out a happy sigh before they bumped into each other. "We can wait as long as we want to talk about things like that, Kyumi. Don't worry that I want you to push yourself. But, I want to." She looked up into his eyes as her words trailed off. As she looked into them, they got bigger. "Oh?" she asked in a soft voice, "don't you?" He got a red face. "Of course, I'm sure, but I can tell that you and I are both a little nervous about it. It's funny that we already do all these naughty things to each other, but sex is the one thing that makes us so nervous," she said with a smirk and a blush. "Is that so, Naruto?" Naruto smiled in response to her smirk. "You'd think it would be something else, but I'm fine with this. I think it's natural, you know. Couples can go at any pace they want, and as long as things work out, it's all good." She leaned against him as they walked and said, "That makes a lot of sense. For someone like me who doesn't know much about these kinds of things, you are so much smarter about them." When he felt her put her cheek on his shoulder, he looked down at her. "Well, I guess I'm pretty good at relationships, since I did get you to be my girlfriend." Kyumiko replied, Yeah, that's true, and then she gave a soft laugh. Man, this talk was helping me a little bit at first, but now all I can think about is how sore my legs are, he said with a grunt as he took a long step to stretch himself out. She looked up at him and said, I can give you a ride on my back. He blinked. Wouldn't that be kind of strange? Not as weird as you complaining about how short your monkey legs are, she said with a smirk. See, now I feel like I should complain even more, Naruto said in reply, nudging her gently. Kyumiko let out an amused snort. What, you don't like the idea of having a woman carry you around? Well, I mean, no, it's not like that, he stuttered as his cheeks turned red, which made her laugh. I'm just having fun with you, Naruto. He was sad. All right, I love it when you get embarrassed, my dear. It really brings out the blue in your eyes and the yellow in your hair when there are bits of red in the mix, Kyumiko said with a sly grin. Kind of like how I like it when I spank you and your skin turns a little red. Her eyes got big, and she turned red quickly. And Naruto, after he snorted, he said, ha, and the corners of his lips curled up into a toothy smile. Looks like the tables have turned, Kyumi. Now it's you who's blushing. Yes, but unlike you, I was able to make you blush without mentioning. Spanking. Kyumiko's cheeks were puffed out and her brow was furrowed as she looked at him. HMPH. Okay. That was a low blow, Naruto said with an apology smile as he reached over and patted her on the head. Sorry, you'll have to do better than that, honey, she said with her cheeks still puffed out. I don't want to just hear what you say, I want to see what you do, too. When we get back, I want you to give me a massage. Alright, I want you to take a bath with me. Sure, and a belly rub for an hour. Also, she made a face. I want you to do that thing with your tongue again. Naruto gave a slow nod of the head. Yeah, okay, that seems fair. I hope I don't pass out as soon as I get home. Kyumiko said, no, you won't. You're stronger than that, my dear. If you say so. She pushed him a little. Yes, I know. After she said that, the edges of his lips turned up into a small smile on his face. When he started to get some of his energy back, he thought that maybe walking up the side of a mountain wouldn't be so bad. He could definitely make it if he had good company, fresh air, and a beautiful view of the jungle below and Kyumiko next to him. He did end up getting there in the end. He took the last step up and made it to the top of the mountain. He was tired, worn out, and about to break. His legs and arm were numb because Kyumiko had to hold on to him tightly for the last couple of minutes to keep him from falling down and killing himself. Even though he pretty much hated everything he had to do to get there, he was glad he had made it. It looked like Kyumiko was happy, too, because as soon as he fell down, she started clapping. Congratulations, Naruto. You made it, she said quietly, giggling at how tired her boyfriend looked. Naruto did nothing but grunt in response. With your butt up like that, you look really ugly, Kyumiko said as she walked over to him and poked him on the backside with her finger. Too tired to care, was his quiet answer. She knelt down next to him and said softly, come on, honey. I'm sure you have a little more energy to spare. He made a groaning sound. Ugh, perhaps. No maybes, Kyumiko said with a pout as she put both of her arms under him to try to turn him over. You've already made it this far. Use whatever energy you have left to join me in enjoying the view, he asked quietly as he was rolled onto his back. Is it really that good? It is. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, which he really needed, before slowly getting to his feet. He grunted again, this time because his legs were starting to hurt. He then opened his eyes and took a look around. In fact, the view was very pretty, though he ended up just staring at Kyumiko as he took in the beautiful misty clouds and bits of green and bright colors from the jungle that could be seen through them. Yes, you're right, the view is great, he told her with a smile. She made a face at him. All you ever do is look at me. That's because you're the most beautiful person on the island, he said, widening his smile when Kyumiko's cheeks turned red. Me. Kyumiko smacked him on the chest in fun. You and your sweet words, Naruto, are sweeter than apples with honey. He hit her on the back of the shoulder and said, only when I'm with you, Kyumi. Aha, she said as she sat down next to him and put her head on his shoulder. We both know that's not true. I didn't make you the kind person you are, Naruto, he said. Even though he was tired, he was quick to put his arm around her. Well, at least I can thank you for keeping me nice. If I were on this island by myself, I'd probably go crazy or something. I forget how easy it is for your kind to get lonely, Kyumiko said, putting one hand on his lap. I guess I am now, too. I wouldn't last long with you around, my sweetheart. I'm sure you're strong enough to get by without me. She gave a head shake. No, not at all. I don't want to even think about going on without you. Kyumi, I love you more than life itself, Naruto. She stopped, turned slowly to face him, and hugged him. When she hugged him back, Naruto put one hand behind her head and kept the other on her upper back. I love you too, Kyumi. Naruto, I know you can't help but think about the future, but, well, just focus on the present for me, okay? I want you to enjoy the time we have together as much as possible, he said softly as he gave her a firm, loving squeeze, as if he could sense her worries. She stopped herself. You're right, Naruto. I'll do my best, right now, while I still have you, to love you as much as I can. Slowly, Naruto moved back so he could see her face and look into her eyes. I can see why you wanted me to come all the way up here with you. It's a very romantic place up here in the middle of the island. If you think about it, we're so close to the sky that it's almost like we're both in heaven. No, we're in heaven, she said with a warm smile. I am, at least. Are you? I am, he said with a smile, and then he kissed her lips quickly. Yumiko whined softly when he separated from her, expecting the kiss to be much deeper. Clasping her hands behind his neck, she pulled him in against her and kissed him the way that she had wanted him to kiss her. She wanted every kiss between them to be deep, passionate, and full of love. As she kept kissing him, his hands moved to her wide hips. When he squeezed them, she made a soft moan into his mouth. At first, it looked like he was going to take control, but he gave up before she did, which made her very happy. Not often could she get him to give in first, so this was a very special time for her. She finally stepped back. She pulled away from him slowly and gently, then licked her lips to taste the small strands of saliva he had left there while they were kissing. When she looked back at him, she laughed softly when she saw that his blue eyes were glazed over. It looked like her kiss had shocked him so much that he needed a moment to get his bearings. Maybe it's just me, but I find it much more interesting to kiss on top of a mountain than in the middle of a jungle. He gave a slow nod of the head. Absolutely. Even so, she tilted her head and asked, though, what do we do to get down? Yumiko blinked. Well, my legs are going numb, and it's starting to get dark. I kiss you so sweetly, and all you can think about is how numb your legs are. He turned red. Well, she gave him a light push that she meant to be light. Naruto, way to spoil the moment.
This was it for the series. If you wanna watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weeb offline.